Magical World War I. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 401. Those who are late are no longer eligible to sit at the table. The cemetery of the Breton family is in the Temple of the Serpent of Fate in the Lucavero district. This temple was built during the Sherlockian dynasty and has existed for 6 eras. Charlotte accompanied Anne here last time, and this time she is still with Anne. The only difference is that she came to see Anne's aunt last time, and this time she is visiting Lady Nanny Breton Axel, the future Queen of Fowls. As long as her husband, Maclean Breton, ascends the throne, this lady will definitely be named Queen of Fowls. Charlotte changed into a formal dress for the first time. This dress came from the Count of Brittany. It was one of Anne's dresses that she chose from her father's dress. Because of the rush of time, there was no time to order a new dress. Therefore, Charlotte's dress has the emblem of the Breton family. The funeral was very simple, with no more than 50 people in total. The people who could attend the funeral, except for those close to the Breton family, were at least earls. It was at this funeral that Charlotte first met the famous Duke Robin, the Grand Duke of the Empire whose son married Princess Axel and whose grandson was called Zimmerman. It was also the first time that Charlotte met Count Galinold, who had just returned from the battlefield of Furlington. If nothing unexpected happened, the people who could attend the funeral would be the dignitaries of the new dynasty. It was a miracle that Charlotte could be among them. And was still so sad that she could not help herself. If it were not for Charlotte's support, she might not even be able to stand. Charlotte could not bear it and prayed silently, "You who travel in the long river of time, know all mysteries, master extraordinary rituals, and dominate the court of fate. How many joys of fate do I have now? Can I use them all on Miss Anne of Brittany?" A young man's voice answered leisurely, 28. "Are you sure?" Charlotte answered decisively, "Sure. I hope that Anne will always be favored by fate, live a peaceful and smooth life, and never suffer any disasters." The young man laughed and said, "Great. Now you owe me 32 portions of the joy of fate." Charlotte was shocked and shouted, "Did I make any extraordinary wishes just now?" This time, no one answered, but the whisper of fate in her hand kept making clear sounds like snickering, as if something happy happened to the snake of fate. Charlotte just wanted Anne to be happier, but she never thought that 28 portions of the joy of fate were not enough, and she actually owed the snake of fate 32 portions. Although Charlotte still didn't quite understand what the joy of fate was, she gradually figured out that this thing was probably extremely precious. Charlotte muttered secretly, 60 portions of the joy of fate? Is it enough to promise to become a god level? At least it shouldn't be difficult to promise to become a saint level, right? Forget it, it's for Anne anyway, so it's not a waste to have more. Charlotte didn't know what wish he had made at that moment until 12 years later. What extraordinary thing had the Serpent of Fate promised her? Charlotte regretted it very much at that time. Why didn't she owe herself 60 more copies of the Joy of Fate and make a wish for herself? This is fate, unpredictable. This is the Serpent of Fate, which has been holding it back for 12 years just to see him make a fool of himself. The funeral was grand but simple. After the funeral, Maclean Breton drove away everyone, including his children. He wanted to stay here with his wife for a while longer. Charlotte said goodbye to the high priest of the temple, took Anne away, and went directly back to 221B Baker Street, Val d'Oise. This place is very close to the central government office. Both Anne and Charlotte like to get together here. Since the establishment of this place, the two have rarely met at 58 Champs-Élysées, because that would shorten the time the young couple spend together and waste some time on the road. Anne was still very sad. She cried for a while and fell asleep in Charlotte's arms again. Charlotte sat on the sofa, holding her beloved girl in her arms. Looking through the magic alchemy crystal glass window, she looked at the people coming and going on Baker Street, and her heart was peaceful and tranquil. He traveled through time and his days were exciting, but the easy life like now would only last a few days. Now he had to wait patiently. 3 months later, Count Maclean of Brittany ascended the throne and became the Emperor of Fars, and everything was stable. Although there will be wars, there should be no crisis. At this moment, there was an army outside Strasbourg. The atmosphere of this army was strange, and its commander had a bad temper recently. Sophia Galinold's dining table was in a mess, and all the tableware was in a terrible state. When she learned that Charlotte had sent a document to the whole country, declaring Redmire as a false king, and had mobilized all the troops to attack Strasbourg, the Miss Rose, who was named after the city, brought all the troops and even abandoned the Queen Bee, and went to Strasbourg to help. However, she got the news a little late, and when she arrived in Strasbourg, everything was over. Even her father, Count Galinold, announced his support for Mecklenburg to become the new ruler of the empire. Sophia Galinold was furious, clenched her silver teeth, and said from her teeth, "You are the only one who can smash the plate, right, Anne Breton, the serpent of fate is too partial. How did I lose to her? I just arrived late, Sophia Galinold was just one step late. I didn't lose, I don't admit defeat." Sophia Galinold kicked the dining table in front of her and shouted, "Go back. Let's go back to the sea, that's our battlefield." When Sophia Galinold led her men to retreat, in the sky, Domitian couldn't help asking, "Are we still going to Strasbourg?" Menelman said lightly, "Let's go back too. Latecomers are no longer qualified to sit at the table." Beside Menelman were all the saints under her. She received the intelligence earlier than Sophia Galinold, but encountered the fleet of the Black Phoenix dynasty on the sea. It was a hard battle. Although she won a great victory, she arrived later than Miss Rose. Before leaving, Menelman took one more look at Strasbourg, and suddenly thought of that person. The image of Charlotte Mecklen seemed to overlap with that person. Both of them were so domineering and unscrupulous, but one suddenly turned from a saint into a promiscuous playboy, and the other turned from a playboy into a love myth. If possible, Menelman suddenly wanted to switch with Anne de Brittany. The imperial rose also wanted to be broken in someone's hands occasionally. Chapter 402, Missing Captain Huntington. Charlotte has become increasingly busy recently. After getting the promise from his future father-in-law, he discussed with Antonio to give up the 11 cities in the Red Dragon Strait, and Antonio sent people to take over. The location of the Red Dragon Sea is very critical. It has to face the Yorks from the southern continent, and it is also a commercial channel. His Majesty Brittany would definitely not be at ease if it was handed over to others. It is the best choice to hand it over to Antonio. Charlotte did not leave a single person in the 11 cities in the Red Dragon Sea. Whether it was orcs or humans who had recently defected, they were all taken away. These people could not be digested by the South Seraph war zone. Well, it will take until the Count of Brittany ascends the throne before South Seraph will be changed to an earldom. Charlotte also took part of Behemoth, and more was sent to Cappadocia. Before the handover, Charlotte did not forget to turn all these 11 cities into mazes. Although there is still some time, he also has to prepare to go to the Aegir's Sea to challenge Egmiris. Although Charlotte couldn't understand what the difference was between going to the Sea of Aegir's to challenge the evil god and being forced into the evil god's arena, he still decided to go there by himself. Charlotte planned to take the Holy Light Kingdom to the Sea of Aegir's if she could repair it, otherwise she would use the Queen Bee. Sophia Galinold should be a qualified captain now, and she can just become a new member of his adventure. Well, in fact, senior sister Menelman is also fine, he is not picky. When Charlotte was mobilizing the Knights of Favonius, he discovered that after he led the army to besiege Strasbourg, not only did the number of troops not decrease, but it increased by more than 20,000 to 30,000. He accepted the private knights of Prince Redmire and Duke Mossard, and also gathered all the gang members in Strasbourg, allowing the Knights of Favonius to expand their forces again. Especially the knights of the two great nobles, they are all elite, and there are even some extraordinary ones. Redmire died, Modafus and Duke Mossard escaped, leaving the knights behind. This wave suddenly gave Charlotte a lot of talents, and these talents were all cautious and humble. Well, they were all worried about being regarded as rebels and being dragged out to chop off their heads. Charlotte gathered the Maze Guards and the most elite teams in Sedona City on the front line of South Seraph. Although he didn't go back, he also missed his old rival Chloe. Charlotte was going to wait for the war to start, and then let the old goat take action to capture this high-level extraordinary alive. Well, you can try to persuade him to surrender, and even if you can't persuade him to surrender, you can let him live. Who made the two of them fight a tacit war for so long? They have accumulated some friendship. While Charlotte was struggling with her knights and territory, she also did not forget to sort out the central government office from top to bottom. Although the central government office was not high in the administrative sequence of FARs, far below the ministers, and the director was only a 5th-level government official of the 12th grade, it was the core department of the empire. Charlotte is now the Count of the Empire and the son-in-law of His Majesty Brittany. He is a confidant, a follower, a diehard, and a powerful team. If he wants to forcibly intervene in the affairs of the central government office, not to mention this department, no one dares to say anything about the entire imperial government sequence. A few days after the funeral of the Countess, when Charlotte was processing documents, she accidentally found the documents of the Imperial Rose Fleet and the East Wind Fleet swearing allegiance. Charlotte hurriedly copied these two documents to the royal office. The central government departments of the empire have always been the central government office, the royal office, and the Queen's office. Now Antonio is in charge of the royal office. As for the Queen's office, because Fars has no queen for the time being, Mother Karen is acting as the temporary agent. After copying these two documents, Charlotte also drafted the rewards for Menelman and Sophia Gallinold. When he was drafting the documents, he suddenly felt that things had changed. He, Charlotte Mecklen, was now able to decide the promotion and demotion of many imperial officials. For many orders, he didn't even need to ask for instructions from his superiors. He was the highest decision maker. After handling government affairs for a while, Charlotte felt a little dizzy. She threw down her work and went to look through old materials. There were a lot of top-secret materials in the central government office, which Charlotte had never been able to access before, but now he could look through them at will. There were a lot of ancient secrets, imperial top secrets, and even many legends about gods. Charlotte needed this information very much. He looked through it for a while and found a top-secret document from Kilmainham prison, dated 3 months ago. After all, Charlotte had worked in this prison, and couldn't help but be curious, so he just opened it. Generally speaking, there is nothing new in prison. The top-secret document from 3 months ago may have been out of date. Charlotte took a look and felt goosebumps all over her body. The content of this top-secret document is, in the demiplane at the bottom of Kilmainham prison, a riot broke out and more than a dozen people are missing. The demiplane at the bottom of Kilmainham prison is one of the great secrets of the empire. Only a very few high-level officials know it, and many nobles who are not in key positions may not know it. Every year, the empire transports a large number of prisoners, erases their memories, forges their identities, and makes them residents here to explore the ruins and dig up wealth for the empire. This is a one-way passage. All prisoners have no way back, and no one has ever left. The empire absolutely does not allow the public to know about this. Even most of the imperial bureaucrats are not allowed to know. However, these things are not important. What is important is that Captain Huntington is on the list of people missing in this riot. Even the current warden does not know the identity of Captain Huntington. In this world, there should be a few people who know that Captain Huntington is Zimmerman Axelrobin, such as the old Emperor Julius Axel VI, who must know it, and even gave the order. Well, now Charlotte knows why Julius Axel VI did not kill Zimmerman, but only wiped all his memories and exiled him to the demiplane, because he is the grandson of the old emperor. But now, the only people in the world who know that Captain Huntington is Zimmerman Axelrobin may be Menelman and Charlotte Mecklen. For a moment, Charlotte didn't know who to discuss this matter with. Why did Zimmerman disappear? Didn't he lose all his memories, or did he just disappear normally? After all, the bottom floor of Kilmainham prison is a demiplane abandoned by the gods and once had a brilliant civilization, but Charlotte always felt that this matter was not that simple. Chapter 403, The Oracle of the Serpent of Fate. Charlotte had never been loyal to Julius Axel VI. He was a time traveler. Why would he play the game of loyalty to the emperor? Charlotte had never cared about the laws of the empire. Well, according to the laws of Earth, many of the laws of Fars were quite illegal. As for the various crimes committed by Zimmerman, Charlotte had also studied them. After all, he had helped Menelman burn the documents. According to the morality of Earthlings, there was no particularly heinous crime except dueling and killing. So his feelings towards Zimmerman were very complicated, a little bit novel, and a little envious. Charlotte hesitated for a moment, gently touched the whisper of destiny on his hand, and the golden snake ring suddenly issued a very clear instruction, asking him to burn this top-secret document. Charlotte was startled. The whisper of destiny had almost never had such clear instructions, and it also clearly told him that Zimmerman had escaped, not missing normally. This matter is really interesting. Charlotte rubbed her hands together, and a blood flame flew out, igniting the document. He decided to follow the oracle of the Snake of Fate. However, after get off work, he decided to find Antonio and tell his brother-in-law about this matter. After all, Antonio had participated in the siege of Zimmerman. What if this imperial legend still had some memory and suddenly took revenge on Antonio? He also deliberately listened to the guidance of the whisper of fate. This time, the ring of the golden snake returned to being as soft as the breeze and vague. However, the whisper of fate did not object. He told Antonio about this matter. Knowing such a big secret, Charlotte was no longer interested in continuing to work. He was about to get off work, but suddenly remembered something and drafted 2 documents by hand. One of them was to relieve himself of his political status as the chief of the patrol army in the Lucavero district and promote Dubin to the chief of the patrol army in the Lucavero district. One was to give the group of adventurers at the time, that is, Charlotte Mecklen's starting team, all of whom were promoted to the 3rd level of their positions, perfectly fulfilling the original promise, and everyone would have a net worth of hundreds of IQ. Well, although the time for supporting the funds is a little longer, the total compensation paid is definitely more than what was promised at the beginning. After Charlotte signed, the 2 documents came into effect directly. He expedited the 2 documents and believed that someone would deliver them to the right person tomorrow. After finishing the 2 documents, Charlotte went to find Anne. Anne also works in the central government office. Well, although she has not officially been given a title yet, it is already known to everyone that this Miss Brittany will soon become Princess Anne, and no one in the entire central government office dares to disobey her. When Charlotte came to find Anne, he didn't even need to push the door open. Naturally, someone helped him open the door, and a female clerk helped Anne organize the documents and gave her a coat. Anne was used to it. She had originally lived such a life, but she deliberately lowered her living standards with Charlotte. Now Charlotte is also the Earl of Mecklen, and Anne didn't do anything deliberately. The 2 did not go back to 58 6th Avenue, nor did they take a carriage. Instead, they walked hand in hand to 221B Baker Street. However, Anne's status was different now, and she no longer needed a housekeeper for the apartment. The apartment had been bought by Anne, and the entire apartment provided services for Charlotte and Anne. The servants were also replaced by people from the Brittany family. Charlotte stepped into the room and saw the magic portrait on the wall. She smiled and said, "Why did you change it?" Anne whispered, "My mother passed away. I think I should be more solemn recently." The magic portrait on the wall showed Anne in a formal dress. Well, it was actually Charlotte and Anne in formal dresses, leaning against each other, and the atmosphere was warm. Charlotte shrugged her shoulders. She didn't care what was on the magic painting. She ordered a cup of coffee first, and sat in front of the window with Anne, looking at the people on the street. Charlotte suddenly said gently, "Although I am a little anxious, I really can't wait. When should I ask His Majesty for a marriage? 1 month after His Majesty ascends the throne, or 2 months? Anne blushed immediately, and after a while, she whispered, 1 month. The first major event in the Fars Empire is the ascension of His Majesty Brittany. Nothing can steal the limelight of this event. Only by grasping the righteousness, His Majesty the Emperor of Brittany can declare the orthodoxy to the whole country of Fars, obtain the loyalty of the onlookers, mobilize the power of the whole country of Fars, participate in the 4-nation alliance, and divide the Black Phoenix dynasty. As long as this war is won, the prestige of the Emperor of Brittany will surely far exceed that of Julius Axel VI, and the stubborn elements in the country will surely not dare to have other ideas, and then they will naturally come to attack those nobles who are ready to move and refuse to surrender. Although Charlotte is a little anxious, after all, he is not young anymore, and it has been almost 3 years since graduation. But he can only wait patiently for this major event to pass. Anne seemed to be immersed in happiness. After a long while, she felt a little sad again and whispered, "It's a pity that my mother can't see me get married." Charlotte held Anne's little hand and whispered, "Mrs. Nanny Brittany Axel will bless us." Anne leaned gently on Charlotte's shoulder, and the two did not speak for a long time. The two stayed at 221B Baker Street until the evening. Charlotte was ready to send Anne home. After the two got on the carriage, Anne suddenly whispered, "Father gave me the mansion of Prince Redmire." Charlotte suddenly cheered up. Anne had her own house, so she might not have to go back to 58 6th Avenue. However, Anne's next sentence dispelled his delusion. Anne whispered, "After we get married, we will move there to live, okay?" Charlotte nodded. He didn't have such a grand house in Strasbourg. As a fiefdom earl, his mansion must be in his own fiefdom. In other words, Count Mecklen's mansion must be in South Serif. As for which city in South Serif, that is Charlotte's own preference. Count Garanord also has the position of Minister of War, so he can have a mansion in Strasbourg. The same is true for Count Brittany. Of course, the most important thing is that other fief nobles have been passed down for hundreds of years, while Count Mechlin is a complete upstart, which is also a small discrimination against the new nobles. Charlotte sent Anne to No. 58 6th Avenue. He watched Anne walk into the gate and then drove away in the carriage. Charlotte sat in the dark luxury, and suddenly felt a little alert in his heart. His insight ability sensed that someone was following him. Chapter 404, The Young Man Who Mastered the Power of the Fire Evil God Enlulu. Charlotte pushed open the door of the carriage, hooked the upper edge of the carriage, and climbed onto the roof. The Eagle Eyes ability was activated, allowing him to quickly find his target in the crowd, a pale young man. When the young man saw that Charlotte had found him, he panicked and turned and ran into an alley. Charlotte said lightly, "Rolf, go. I want him alive." The old goat floated into the air from another carriage nearby, and in just a moment he picked up the pale young man. The pale young man looked horrified and shouted, "How could you have the help of the Saint Order?" The diary in Charlotte's arms was slightly hot, and the whisper of fate in his hand also made a slight sound. He was extremely surprised and asked, "Why are you following me?" The pale young man gritted his teeth, clearly intending to say nothing. Charlotte didn't know any spells to search memory, and he was too lazy to explore the other party's secrets. He said to the old goat, "Kill him." As a powerful earl in the empire, Charlotte naturally had no concerns about those who threatened him, and he would kill them if he could. The young man was horrified and shouted, "You dare to kill people in the street?" Charlotte was not interested in answering him. Why would Count Mechlin not dare to do such a small thing as killing people in the street? He had killed the Fey King in the palace. The old goat was about to break the young man's neck with a pinch. He finally became terrified and shouted, "Don't kill me, I am a candidate for the evil god like you." Charlotte was slightly surprised. He waved his hand to stop the old goat and said, "Take him away, summoning evil gods should never be heard by others." Charlotte took the man to number 1 Falcon Street. Although he was no longer the chief of the patrol army in the Lucavero district, it was still no problem to interrogate a few people here, not to mention that the documents had not yet reached Dubin. It was rare for Charlotte to come back to work. This time, he kept the old team of the patrol army, which finally made this office a little popular. He found an ordinary interrogation room, threw the pale young man in it, and said lightly, "Go ahead." Although Charlotte had never interrogated a prisoner, he had questioned students whether they had done their homework. He used educational psychology in interrogation. Although the direction was wrong, the basic principles could be used. The pale young man was frightened by Charlotte's decisive killing and broke his defense. He told the whole story. His name is Mortensen Tim. He is a second-generation immigrant from the New World. His father is also from Fars. He sailed across the ocean to the New World. Recently, the evil gods in the New World were fighting, and his family spent a lot of money to buy a boat ticket and return to the Old World. As the old leopard had said, the New World was full of evil gods, and there were many people who believed in the labyrinth evil god. Mortensen Tim was a young man who had mastered the power of the fire evil god Enlulu by chance, and obtained the status of an evil god candidate, and would participate in the evil god arena in 6 months. The more Charlotte asked, the more confused she became, and she pondered slightly. Mortensen Tim was very uneasy. He didn't know Charlotte, but he sensed another evil god candidate, so he decided to follow her for a while. The evil god candidates could kill each other and plunder the power of the evil god from each other. He wanted to see if there was a chance to kill Charlotte, plunder the power of the evil god from the other party, and delay the time to enter the evil god arena. Charlotte couldn't help but ask, "Can the candidates of the evil god master different powers of the evil god?" Mortensen Tim was slightly surprised and said, "Of course, the candidates of the 36 great evil gods can all enter the evil god arena." Charlotte had some doubts and puzzles, but now it suddenly became clear. He had never understood what the difference was between going to the Ager's Sea to challenge Agneris and being forced into the evil god arena. The appearance of Mortensen Tim made him realize that he had entered a misunderstanding. That is, he thought that all the candidates of the evil god were candidates for the labyrinth evil god Agneris, but in fact, all the 36 great evil gods in the New World had candidates. In other words, being forced into the evil god arena is more dangerous and the enemies are more complicated. Charlotte asked some things clearly and was about to kill the pale young man. Mortensen Tim followed him for no reason. What did he want to do? He almost figured it out with his toes. Although he didn't know, the candidates of the evil god could kill each other and plunder the evil god's power from each other. Charlotte made a gesture to the old goat, and Mortensen and Tim immediately screamed, "I have important information. As long as you spare me, I can give you a great advantage in the evil god arena." Charlotte shrugged and said, "I don't need any advantage. Besides, if this information is important, why don't you use it yourself?" He didn't want to go to any evil god arena. Although challenging Agnerus was also difficult, Charlotte guessed that the probability of survival was higher than going to the evil god arena. Mortensen and Tim shouted, "I'm just a first-level extraordinary person, and my family is just ordinary, but you have power and influence, so you can definitely do it. Evil gods need human souls, because souls are the fuel of evil gods. If you can kill hundreds of people and collect these souls, you can increase the power of evil gods." Charlotte was very surprised and asked, "Souls are the fuel of evil gods?" Mortensen and Tim nodded repeatedly and said, "That's right." Charlotte asked curiously, "Then why don't you kill people?" Mortensen and Tim's face was a little pale, and he murmured in a low voice, "I can't do it. I really want to kill you, but I walked the same street with you and I haven't decided whether I should do it. If you hadn't noticed it, I would probably give up. I'm really not a bad person, but I'm entangled by the power of the evil god and I'm almost driven crazy." Charlotte pondered for a moment. He really believed what Mortensen and Tim said. This pale-faced young man looked like he hadn't killed many people. Well, compared to him, he has killed too many people. Charlotte asked, "Do you know how to gather souls and increase the power of the evil god?" Mortensen and Tim hesitated for a long time, nodded, and said, "I know. I have obtained the relevant secret method." He immediately recited a very simple little spell. Charlotte listened for a while, and her face was slightly surprised, because this little spell, in many places, overlapped with a beast god transformation spell. However, the beast god transformation spell looked normal, but this little spell called Evil Eye was a real evil spell. It could deprive a person of his soul, and gain some memories, and even take away some skills. This spell was almost a bit like Cat's Mask. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 405 Farewell to the Holy Kingdom of Light. All superpowers rely on extraordinary energy. Mortals cannot activate them. Only extraordinary people, and those who follow the corresponding path, can use them. For example, bloody glory is a general evil energy, so Charlotte will never be able to condense the certificate of the 8 Knights. Without changing into an orc, Charlotte cannot activate the bloodthirsty fighting spirit. This small spell called Evil Eye has a wide range of adaptability, but it still must rely on evil energy, that is, almost all evil god power and extraordinary energy of the general evil energy can be practiced, but other extraordinary energy cannot. It is at least 70% similar to the Cat's Mask. It can condense an evil eye at the center of the eyebrows, devour the soul of the living being, and obtain part of the other party's memory and some skills. Well, this spell cannot deprive others of their superpowers. However, it is not mainly for such a small thing, but to ignite the devoured soul and enhance the power of evil energy. Well, it is very similar to the Blood Clan relying on blood-sucking and devouring vitality to increase strength. It's just that one devours the soul and the other devours life. If he had just come here, Charlotte might be very excited and would use it on the battlefield. After all, it would be a waste if he didn't devour the enemy's soul. But now he is a high-level extraordinary person, and of course he knows that all shortcuts have a price. Just like the blood race devouring too many lives, causing the blood energy to be mixed, it will cause corruption. The biggest negative impact of this direct devouring of souls is the devouring of memories. These memories will confuse the brain. As for whether there are other sequelae, Charlotte doesn't know yet. However, this seemingly quick method is actually not that quick. It can only turn a mediocre person into a relatively ordinary genius. For example, this Mortensen Tim must have used the Evil Eye, but now he is still only a first-level extraordinary person. Charlotte pondered for a moment and thought to herself, the Evil Eye doesn't have the ability to change a person's appearance. It's slightly different from the Beast God Transfiguration and the Cat's Mask. However, are evil gods so popular in the New World? An ordinary supernatural being can obtain the power of evil gods and even get a sinister spell like the Evil Eye. This guy doesn't look like he has devoured many souls, but I believe that in the new world, there must be countless people who will kill innocent people just for practice. Charlotte has never been to the new world. He only heard about some things about the new world from a few acquaintances. To him, the new world is still quite novel, although every acquaintance described it as a bit of hell on earth. Charlotte was pondering, and Mortensen was terrified. The pale young man couldn't help but scream, "I really haven't hurt anyone." Charlotte reached out and patted his shoulder, saying, "Join the Knights of Favonius, or die." Mortensen took a deep breath and shouted, "I'll join." He was too scared. As a resident of the New World, he had never seen such a terrifying existence as Charlotte in the New World, where evil gods, monsters and demons were rampant. He still remembered that Charlotte said lightly, "Rolf, go," and a holy order flew up and captured him alive. How terrifying was this? Even in the New World, holy orders were not everywhere. Charlotte still had some background after all. Although Mortensen was a candidate for the evil god, he might have had bad intentions when tracking him, but he didn't do it after all. There was no murderous aura on his body. It was obvious that he hadn't killed many people. Charlotte, who had been on the battlefield, was very sensitive to this point, and this person was still useful. Put him in the actual regiment for the time being. If there is any evil intention, it will be killed in time. Mortensen was sent out with lingering fear. He soon got a set of patrol uniforms, weapons, and formal identity documents. He was completely confused. You know, his family has been back to the old world for a while, but they can only live off their savings and can't find a job at all. Even if Mortensen is a transcendent, he is a first-level flame transcendent, and he is still more inclined to magic, so there are not many suitable jobs he can find. After all, the country is at war now, and all jobs are more inclined to go to the battlefield. Mortensen's family returned to the old world just to live a stable life, not to be cannon fodder on the battlefield. In Mortensen's eyes, Charlotte is definitely a super boss, but he didn't expect that this boss is so powerful that he can write identity documents on the spot. Is this a regular civil servant sequence in farce? Mortensen received the identity document and couldn't help asking, "What is the identity of that gentleman?" The member of the Knights of Favonius who was handing over to him replied with a smile, "Count Charlotte Mecklen, the son-in-law of the new emperor." Mortensen suddenly understood and nodded frequently. This is right. This is a big thick leg. Charlotte was alone in the office. After pondering for a while, she suddenly figured out something. This matter is very simple, but he had been refusing it before, so every time he thought of it, he would avoid it. In fact, the evil eye is not important, and it is not necessary to devour souls. As long as the evil energy can be improved, the time to face the evil god can be postponed. So, I am now a 15th level extraordinary, and I am still full of blood energy. The time for Karnstein's arrival has been postponed again and again. Now the time of his arrival has been postponed from the initial 6 days to more than a year later, but the evil god on the new world is different from the evil god in the old world. Agmaris is also different from Karnstein. What kind of evil god arena is there in the new world? I will turn all the evil god scrolls in my hand into Agmaris's labyrinth, and then turn as many cities into labyrinths as possible. No, I want to improve the infinite mirror world first. Maybe when my strength is improved and I go to the Sea of Aglars, there will be a little surprise. Charlotte was silent for a long time, opened a magic mirror, passed through the infinite mirror world, and set foot on St. Michael Island again. He did not stay anywhere on the island, nor did he meet anyone, and went directly to the 6th floor of the underground maze. Charlotte saw the majestic Holy Light Kingdom again. This first-generation legendary warship was like a floating palace, magnificent and luxurious. However, this legendary warship seemed a little different from the last time Charlotte saw it. Before Charlotte came into contact with a divine creature, a thought echoed in her mind. The fangs of the sea serpent Vasuji, the tears of the king of giant whales, the branches of the ancient Madra tree, the blood of the peak holy rank. The one who collects all of this. I will serve you as my master and am willing to carry you anywhere to explore all the treasures of the 7 seas. Chapter 406 Charlotte Mecklen Master, you can call me Amen. Charlotte was shocked. The last time he came to contact the Holy Light Kingdom, this divine creature made a total of 12 requests. However, after he touched him, 2 of the requests disappeared, and the evil energy of the god of Labyrinth and the breath of the blood ancestor were gone. This time, there were only 4 left, and 6 requests were satisfied. The favor of one of the 9 righteous gods disappeared, which was understandable. Mr. Charlotte Mecklin was the god of the fate serpent. He still owed this righteous god 32 joys of fate. Why didn't the jealousy of the beloved disappear? Charlotte was puzzled. Where was the jealousy between him and Anne? But since the request of this divine creature was met, Charlotte didn't want to delve into it. The fate of the divine creature. Well, Charlotte remembered the god of joy. He went from an independent evil god to the pet of the fate serpent, which seemed to have achieved the goal of changing the fate of the divine creature. The favor of the red dragon emperor, the reward of the lionheart king, and the indifference of serving the monarch. Charlotte had all these, so there was nothing to be confused about. When Charlotte touched this divine creature again, he could even feel the emotions in his heart, full of pleading, but mixed in the pleading, there was also hidden evil. For the first time, Charlotte felt that this was an evil divine creature. He was completely different from Saint Michael, and they were definitely not from the same place. Charlotte took out the diary and turned to the side of the Saint Light Kingdom logbook. At the back of this logbook, there were more records about him, truthfully describing how he became the owner of the Saint Light Kingdom. It's just that the records are not complete because he has not yet completely mastered this legendary warship. The blood of the peak holy rank is easy to say. His Majesty Brittany is a good target. Maybe he can't get it, but Anne can definitely. Anyway, it only takes a little bit. As for the other 3 things, Charlotte was confused. He didn't know where to look for them: the fangs of the sea serpent Vasuji, the tears of the giant whale king, and the branches of the ancient Medora tree. Charlotte stepped onto the legendary warship again, and still wisely did not approach the magic circle at the bow. This legendary warship has more than a dozen floors of cabins, which are magnificent. Even the deck is divided into 6 floors, which can accommodate tens of thousands of people. Charlotte had a vague feeling that this legendary warship was alive. Not only the divine creature that was forcibly nailed to the bottom of the ship was alive, but the entire warship itself was alive. He could even feel that no matter where he went, he would feel like he was being spied on. Charlotte gently stroked the golden ring on his hand. He met the 8 requirements, except that it could not be started, but most places of this legendary warship were open to him. Charlotte had also been on the ship for a while, and knew that for a ship, the most important thing was the captain's room and the cockpit. At the prompt of the whisper of fate, he went straight to the captain's room, which was on the top floor of this legendary warship, occupying a cabin of more than 500 square meters in front, and even had a viewing terrace on each side. When he stepped into the captain's room, the logbook of the Holy Light Kingdom in his hand was slightly hot, and a line of words appeared on the last page: Master Charlotte Mecklin, arrived at his loyal Holy Light Kingdom. In order to reward the Holy Light Kingdom for decades of hard anticipation, a goat was rewarded to him. Charlotte immediately thought of Golden Goat Rolf and thought to herself, does this warship still want to eat people? He glanced at the captain's room and also felt that there was a goat head missing. But the old goat is not a goat man. His nickname is the Golden Goat. Even if his head is chopped off, it will be a bloody human head, not a goat's head. Charlotte muttered silently in her heart, change your request, the old goat is quite useful. After all, he is also one of the top 10 pirates and travels across the 7 seas. He will still need it when he goes to the Agula Sea in the future. Another line of words appeared in the logbook of the Holy Light Kingdom: the joy of destiny is also okay. Charlotte herself still owed the Serpent of Destiny 32 joys of destiny, so how could there be any extra to reward? He silently said, there is no such thing either. Another line of text appeared in the logbook of the Holy Light Kingdom: 500 evil crew members. Charlotte thought silently, this is possible. He has tens of thousands of maze guards, and there will be no problem in allocating a group of them to serve as crew members. After a while, there was no movement in the logbook of the Holy Light Kingdom. Charlotte couldn't help but ask silently, who are you? A line of words appeared in the logbook of the Holy Light Kingdom: Dear Master Charlotte Mecklin, you can call me Amen. Charlotte's eyebrows jumped, as if something pulled her heart. After a long while, she asked, what is your relationship with the woman at the bottom of the ship? After a while, Charlotte thought there would be no answer, and a line of words slowly appeared in the logbook of the Holy Light Kingdom: Amabella is my mother. Although she is unwilling to admit it, Charlotte didn't know how to accept this for a moment, but a line of words slowly appeared in the logbook of the Holy Light Kingdom: Master Charlotte Mecklin, there are markings on the nautical chart in the captain's room, where to find the fangs of the sea serpent Vasuji, the tears of the giant whale king, and the branches of the ancient madra tree. but I don't know how to get the blood of the peak holy level. Charlotte walked around the captain's room and saw a huge sea chart. It marked the old and new continents, and also drew countless islands, as well as the currents of the seven seas. He reached out and pressed on the sea chart, and the huge sea chart responded immediately, and 3 coordinates lit up. Charlotte silently memorized the 3 coordinates. The whisper of fate suddenly made a rustling sound, constantly issuing warnings. He didn't know what happened, but he immediately activated the lightness technique X10, ran out of the captain's room, and didn't even take the normal route, and jumped off the side of the ship. Charlotte had just jumped off the Holy Light Kingdom, and a huge roar sounded behind him. The divine creature that was nailed to the bottom of the ship suddenly became agitated, and sent out a thought like a raging wave, sweeping across the entire cave, as if giving birth to an ocean gale. Fortunately, Charlotte was well prepared and jumped into a magic mirror. The moment he stepped into the mirror world, he saw that the entire Holy Light Kingdom seemed to be alive. The cracked hull was quickly mending, the damaged cabins were automatically repaired, and even the broken mast was erected again. The divine creature at the bottom of the ship suddenly opened its eyes. Charlotte didn't dare to be seen by him and chose to return. Chapter 407, The Strongest Blood Clan. Charlotte reappeared at number 1 Falcon Street, still in fear. He didn't know what had happened. He didn't know what would happen if he stayed. But the reminder of fate made him not want to try. Charlotte had a hunch that something strange must have happened to the Holy Light Kingdom, and this change was not on the original design. As for why this change occurred, there is no way to know for the time being. Charlotte didn't stay at number 1 Falcon Street for long. He had been living at 221B Baker Street during this period, but now he decided to go back to number 58 Élysée Pastoral Street to play with cats. Back at number 58 Élysée Pastoral Street, Charlotte saw 3 clever cats. He was away from home all year round, but thanks to the cat spirit magic taught by Winnie Arsino, he had always communicated well with the 3 pets. Charlotte waved his hand, and the 3 clever cats jumped onto his knees, coiling and rubbing against his body. Charlotte gently kneaded the 3 grown cats. Because they had a good diet and Mrs. Nancy took good care of them, the 3 clever cats were all shiny and sleek. They often used psychic communication. The 3 kittens were obviously more spiritual than their peers and were very smart. Surrounded by the 3 cute kittens, Charlotte suddenly felt her pajamas hide her and she fell asleep on the sofa. In her dream, Charlotte suddenly felt empty. She tilted her body and almost thought she fell down. When she stood up, she found that it was not her home and she did not fall off the sofa. The surrounding environment made him whisper, "Aunt Karen, do you have something to ask me?" "Not that, old lady, I'm looking for you." "It's nothing, I just want to see how your Arthur's secret method is going." Charlotte suddenly felt creepy. He had only heard this voice once and almost forgot it afterwards. But when this voice sounded again, he realized how scared he was. When he devoured the blood essence of Baron Leo's blood servant, he was attacked by the boiling blood and had to practice the blood clan's mantra forcibly. He heard this voice. At that time, the leisurely voice came from the endless void, "Little guy. Arthur's secret method is not so messy." Then a will invaded his mind. This will did nothing, just like plucking the strings of a guitar intentionally or unintentionally. The blood clan's mantra runes that were originally unable to enter were suddenly split apart in his mind, just like mathematical symbols, with clear veins. Countless broken golden runes gathered into a book with a black cover and countless golden lights. Thinking of this mysterious voice and supreme will, Charlotte felt a chill in his heart. The voice chuckled and said, "Don't be so scared. I'm on a diplomatic mission to Fars and visiting the Earl of Brittany's residence." Charlotte couldn't help but exclaimed, "You are." A man who looked very young, but looked very old, appeared in Charlotte's field of vision. Seeing his face full of horror, she couldn't help but laugh and said, "Let me introduce myself. I'm Juno Arthur. Last time, you must have thought you met the blood ancestor of the Arthur family." "Sorry, the blood ancestor is not that easy to meet." Charlotte was shocked by the name. Each of the 5 empires has a number 1 strong man. The number 1 strong man in Ingrima is Count Landlock of Champagne. The number 1 strong man in the Black Phoenix dynasty is Viscount Constank. And the number 1 strong man in Fars is naturally Count Brittany. No, it's His Majesty Brittany. The number 1 strong man in Baron is this Juno Arthur. The number 1 strong man of the Blood Clan. Juno Arthur laughed softly and said, "Last time, I also came to visit my old friend, the Count of Brittany. I met you on the way back to Bayron, so I helped you. But why didn't you practice Arthur's secret method seriously? The Blood Clan's mantra is all-encompassing and omnipotent. As long as you practice this secret method to the most profound level, all the power in the world will be at your fingertips. Charlotte couldn't help but ask, "Why did you help me?" He immediately realized that he had asked a stupid question, and said, "Have you known me for a long time?" Juno Arthur nodded. Charlotte felt a chill all over her body and asked, "Are you very familiar with the Count of Brittany?" Juno Arthur smiled and said, "When I was young, I was rebellious and came to Fars to study at university. I was a classmate of Brittany for several years. At that time, the three of us were inseparable, and our friendship has remained strong to this day." Charlotte asked, "Three people?" Juno Arthur nodded and said with a smile, "And Constantine?" A dangerous idea popped up in Charlotte's mind, and she asked, "Is Viscount Constantine joining this time as well?" Juno Arthur smiled and replied calmly, "Otherwise, why is it about dividing the Black Phoenix? Constantine will become Count Constantine of Byron." Charlotte found that he seemed to know everything, but he really didn't want to know these things. Juno Arthur chuckled and said, "I will stay in Strasbourg for the time being. For the sake of our old friend, I will help him train the younger generation." Charlotte seemed to be in a dream. She could never have imagined that a teacher would suddenly fall from the sky. He couldn't help but ask, "Don't you mind that I'm practicing bloody glory?" Juno Arthur sighed and said, "You should also know that vampires have no reproductive ability and can only be transformed into new vampires through secret rituals or the first embrace. Although Baron is an empire, the population of the Blood Clan has always been low. The current total population of the 31 clans does not exceed 20,000, and is even less than 1,000th of the total population. Both the secret rituals and the first embrace are very inefficient methods. What's more serious is that the Blood Clan's concept is too xenophobic. The Blood Clan population has not increased for so many years. Because of this war, it has even dropped by several hundred. If we don't absorb more new blood, perhaps in a few hundred years, there will be no more Blood Clans in this world. Compared to the population crisis, any other hatred can be put aside for the time being. What's more, you don't hate vampires. Right? Charlotte had never expected that it was for this reason. He knew that the vampire population was indeed small. The few Blood Clans he had met, such as Baron Leo and Julian, were quite friendly. At that time, he thought he had met a good vampire. After hearing what Juno Arthur said, Charlotte realized that some vampires were already worried about the population collapse. No wonder they were willing to accept Duchess Mathu. This time, Viscount Constantine was recruited. Chapter 408 Blood Explosion Technique. Charlotte suddenly thought, is Baron too strong? Although Baron suffered heavy losses in the naval battle, it has been entangled with Fars in Fellenden. However, after obtaining the northern fleet of Duchess Matsu, the navy's strength has recovered by 70% to 80%, and it has also obtained the Fontainebleau. Now Constantine himself has joined. Charlotte suddenly became worried about her old father-in-law. Although Juno Arthur claimed to be an old friend of Brittany, the other vampire clans in Baron are not old friends of the Breton family. Besides, old friends may not always have a falling out. However, this matter is obviously not his turn to worry. After all, he is a high-level extraordinary and can't worry about the affairs of the saint level, especially this group of peak saint levels. Juno Arthur snapped his fingers, and a book with a black cover and countless golden runes appeared. He said to Charlotte, "You have already been promoted to a high level. Theoretically, you should have condensed a blood core long ago." Charlotte blushed. He had indeed thought about condensing a blood core and even gave up sucking the life of the enemy in order to purify the blood. But then he hesitated because he still wanted to get married and have children. If he became a vampire, he would not be able to reproduce. Juno Arthur smiled and said, "Vampires transformed through secret rituals or the first embrace, even if they are still low level and have not yet condensed their blood cores, cannot reproduce. But you still have a chance. It is human nature not to want to condense blood cores so early. I used to. I also liked human girls. It's a pity that I was too obsessed with power at that time. I became a vampire in a hurry before reproducing. I regretted it later, but it was too late." Charlotte asked in surprise, "You were originally human?" Juno Arthur smiled and said, "Yes. Most vampires were once human." Charlotte realized that she had asked a stupid question. There are no natural vampires in the world. Well, maybe there are, but they are very rare. At least Charlotte has never heard of it. Juno Arthur continued, "Since you haven't condensed the blood core yet, What about the original blood boiling? Charlotte whispered. Asilo's blood energy has already been boiled. Arthur's blood energy has also been boiled, but the rest haven't yet. Juno Arthur smiled and said, since the original blood has been boiled, I will start teaching you the first secret method of Arthur, the blood bath technique. This strongest person in the blood clan is definitely a good teacher. He explained the blood bath technique in a simple way and demonstrated in person how to transform the flesh into blood bath. This secret method is easy to learn and easy to master. It is a common spell rarely seen in the blood clan. It has multiple functions. It can release blood bats to scout the battlefield, can transform into countless blood bats to travel, escape, avoid assassination, and even use the blood bat technique to reorganize the body and repair the severely injured body. It is about 70% similar to the blood flame deformation technique, but more exquisite. Charlotte was a little perfunctory at first, but soon he was addicted to it. When he gradually understood the essence of blood bath magic, he suddenly heard Juno Arthur whispered, let's stop here tonight. It's already dawn. Charlotte opened his eyes slightly, and it was indeed dawn. He opened his palm vaguely, and a book with a black cover and gold runes appeared. This was the manifestation of the blood clan's power word. Charlotte opened the first page, and there was already a spell recorded in it, blood bath magic. Charlotte closed the blood clan's power word book, let it disappear in his hand, called Mrs. Nancy, and asked the lady to prepare a carriage and send him to the central government office. Along the way, Charlotte was catching up on sleep. A night of practice was really too exhausting. After work, he didn't deal with any government affairs and continued to catch up on sleep. Only at noon did he go to have a meal with Anne. Anne saw that he was listless and asked about the clues, and Charlotte told the truth. Anne was greatly surprised and whispered, it turns out that the guest from Baron at home is actually the strongest of the vampires. The old Earl of Brittany did not mention this matter to his daughter, because this matter was too important and needed to be kept strictly confidential. However, Juno Arthur went to teach Charlotte the vampire's power words, which was something the old Earl could not have thought of. Anne saw that Charlotte was so tired and did not want to go to work, so she followed Charlotte back to 221B Baker Street and asked him to rest first. She would prepare afternoon tea for Charlotte to enjoy after she woke up. Charlotte did not think much about it. She went back to her room and fell asleep. It was not that she was really sleepy, after all, she was also a superhuman, but learning the vampire's power words was too laborious. In the afternoon, after Charlotte fell asleep, she felt a little more energetic and accompanied him for afternoon tea. The two went out for a walk together. In the evening, Charlotte sent Anne back to 58 6th Avenue. She never went back to 58 Alizé Field Street, but went to Baker Street. When she sat on the sofa, she immediately felt sleepy and closed her eyes. This time, when she opened her eyes, she still saw the grassland with birds singing and flowers blooming. Juno Arthur, who was wearing a far-style hunting suit, smiled and said, your talent in the blood clan's truth words is obviously better than other blood clan secrets. Today I will teach you Arthur's blood explosion technique. The strongest blood clan member grabbed Charlotte's body and she felt the blood in her body flow backwards. With just a little opportunity, she would burst through her body and explode. He was awed and hurriedly urged the bloody glory, but how could he resist the peak holy level? After Juno Arthur demonstrated the blood explosion technique, he taught this secret method to Charlotte in detail. This Arthur's secret technique is about manipulating the blood in the enemy's body and performing various methods. If the enemy is accidentally hit by the blood explosion technique, the blood in the body will be burned. If it cannot resist, it will explode and die. After Charlotte initially mastered the blood explosion technique, Juno smiled and said, do you know the real use of the blood explosion technique? Charlotte shook her head. Juno made a gesture of pulling the trigger and said, it is to absorb the enemy's life and turn it into blood-sucking bullets. As long as there are enough enemies, the blood-sucking bullets condensed by the blood explosion technique will never be cut off. On the battlefield, you will always have a chance to turn the tables. Juno turned his body gracefully, raised his hand slightly, and fired 2 blood-sucking bullets. Although it was in a dream, Charlotte could still feel that the energy of these 2 blood-sucking bullets did not come from Juno Arthur, but from his body. This secret technique was too vicious and cruel, but combined with Juno's elegant gunfighting technique, it became the most chick-killing technique. Charlotte spent this night in hard training again. Chapter 409, Arthur's spearmanship is the best in the world. If the Ursillo clan is the master of swordsmanship of the vampires, and the Vango clan is the master of assassins of the vampires, then the Arthur clan is the classic mage. However, mages have a great weakness and are not good at close combat, so the Arthur clan developed the gun-fighting technique, and the blood explosion technique is a powerful technique developed to cooperate with a gun-fighting technique. The gun skills of the Arthur clan can be called the best in the world. Yes, not the best in the vampires. Charlotte originally learned some gun skills from Aubrey Teutonic Atwood, the president of the Lima Detective Agency. He always felt that his shooting skills were enough. After all, when he mainly fought close to the enemy. But under the guidance of Juno Arthur, Charlotte realized how wrong she was. The various incredible gun-fighting techniques of the strongest vampire, each secret method opened Charlotte's eyes. In the next 10 days, Charlotte's life entered a fixed rhythm. She got up early, went to work, had lunch with Anne at noon, skipped work in the afternoon, took a nap at 211B Baker Street, sent Anne home, and received training from Juno Arthur. Charlotte herself was already a high-level extraordinary person. She had skillful and easy control over her body. She also had auxiliary abilities such as agility and insight. She made rapid progress in blood explosion and gunfighting. That night, Charlotte entered the dreamland again, and saw a table in front of Juno with 2 ordinary pistols on it. Charlotte was a little excited and asked, "Teacher Juno, are we going to practice today?" Juno smiled and said, "You have already mastered the 62 postures of Arthur's gunfighting. We are indeed going to start the next stage of training. Today we will do it, practice, pick a gun. They are all ordinary blood-sucking weapons, not as powerful as the red and blue rattlesnake in your hand, nor as powerful as the withered rose." Charlotte picked up a gun. The 2 pistols were of the same quality. They were both first-level extraordinary weapons, first-level blood-sucking pistols. Juno picked up another gun and smiled at Charlotte. Charlotte's knees softened. She had been shot. The black muzzle of the gun protruded from her ribs. This shot was without any smoke. Charlotte didn't even see the sign of a shot when she opened her insight. After a long time, Charlotte recovered. Fortunately, this was in Juno's dreamland. He just felt pain in his knees, but he was not really injured. Juno smiled and said, "The 6 most critical elements of gunfighting are, not being seen when attacking, seeing through the enemy's weaknesses. Just now you wanted to activate the art of agility, and the blood energy in the knee is the weakest. Pull the trigger as quickly as possible, hit the target accurately, and protect yourself and prepare for the second shot." Charlotte pondered, "Your attack just now was very covert. It was the armpit hiding technique of gunfighting. I did habitually activate the art of agility, and you are too familiar with my attack pattern. You deliberately suppressed the speed of your shooting, but it was still faster than me. As for accuracy, it goes without saying, that is the basic skill of a shooter. Your posture just now was very elegant, but you can jump back at any time, and as for being able to fire a second shot at any time," Charlotte smiled bitterly and said, "I guess you have at least 6 options, all of which are the directions I might counterattack next, and you have predicted them all." Juno nodded and said, "You are a teachable child." He moved his right hand, and Charlotte turned sideways to dodge, but the Blood Clan strongman's left hand magically produced a pistol, and shot Charlotte's knee. Charlotte couldn't help but curse her own stupidity, and she didn't even see that Juno had changed hands with a pistol. The 2 sides fought more than 200 times that night. As the strongest Blood Clan, Juno's spearmanship was the best in the old continent. He could even kill Charlotte with only his mid-level extraordinary strength. Arthur's spear fighting skills were used to perfection by him, and he didn't need a second shot to injure Charlotte, who had already entered the high level. Charlotte always thought that as a high-level extraordinary, she could not be afraid of low-level extraordinary weapons, but when Juno grabbed it, she found that blood could circulate throughout the body, and the strength was uneven, and there were actually flaws everywhere. Although these flaws may be fleeting, if they are caught by a smart enemy, it will be the difference between life and death. The next morning, Charlotte woke up with pain all over her body, especially her knees. It was so painful that she couldn't bear it anymore. Now she knew that although the agility technique was very powerful, it was not without flaws. Every time she used the agility technique, her knees would be easily hit. Charlotte didn't go to work that day. Anyway, he was now the top manager of the central government office, and no one would record his absence. At noon, Anne and Antonio came together. When Antonio saw Charlotte, he said solemnly, "Zimmerman is indeed not dead." "How could he not be dead?" I remember clearly at the time, Charlotte shrugged her shoulders, poured Antonio a glass of beer, and said, I can't answer this question. You have to know that I was still a poor clerk at that time and had no access to any secrets. Charlotte didn't have time to find Antonio these days, but he dated Anne every day, so of course she told Anne about this and asked her to go home and tell her brother. After so many days, Antonio suddenly came to the door. Obviously, he had done some investigation in the past few days. Antonio whispered, this is a big deal. If Zimmerman is still alive, he will definitely take revenge. The 6 people who besieged him will be in danger. Charlotte asked, did your majesty participate in it? Antonio shrugged and said, father didn't. Charlotte said, but your majesty will still be in danger. Antonio sighed and said, I shouldn't have listened to that old man Wood Brandon. Antonio fell into deep self-blame. Charlotte raised her eyebrows. Even if he was just the son of a merchant, he had heard of the name Wood Brandon. He was the head of the imperial ministers and the prime minister of the Fars Empire. Wood Brandon was a man of both civil and military talents. He was not only a top saint, but also proficient in literature, art, and military strategy. He had always been trusted by Julius Axel VI. However, he returned to his fiefdom for recuperation a few years ago for unknown reasons and never came back. Fars had an imperial prime minister, but Strasbourg had never had one. When Charlotte was still a little clerk, she thought the old emperor wanted to collect all the people. But she didn't expect there would be such a thing. He asked, who else besieged Zimmerman? Antonio thought for a moment and said, originally, this should have been the biggest secret, but now that Julius Axel is dead, there is no need to hide it, except for me. The other 5 of the 6 people who besieged Zimmerman were from the royal family. If those people hadn't been seriously injured in the battle to siege Zimmerman, Rudmeyer would not have had a chance to succeed in usurping the throne. Chapter 410 Juno Arthur's Gift. Antonio roughly recounted what happened that year, and Charlotte listened with eyes wide open and secretly smacked her lips. Zimmerman was too outrageous at the time, so the imperial chancellor Wood Brandon decided to deal with this imperial scar, but Zimmerman was too powerful, so he could only invite 5 saints from the royal family, and also Antonio. At a cocktail party, he first cursed Zimmerman 6 times, and then ordered the 6 top saints to besiege him. Zimmerman was furious at the time, and the first blow seriously injured Wood Brandon. In a fierce battle, the 6 saints who besieged him were all seriously injured. Antonio was the least injured, and it took him more than half a year to recover. Since then, he has never seen the imperial chancellor Wood Brandon, nor the other 5 royal saints. Charlotte couldn't help but complain, the Axel family is really asking for trouble. The Axel family has Princess Axel and 5 royal saints who can participate in the siege of Zimmerman. If all these forces are there, how could anyone plot to usurp the throne? Even the Count of Brittany didn't dare to think about it. But who would have known that a small plan by the imperial chancellor Wood Brandon would cause the Axel royal family to decline greatly? This imperial chancellor reminded Charlotte of a genius military advisor in a classic online article. This person can plan everything, but every plan is wrong. He is also a first-class talent. Antonio said, I also told my father about this matter, and he told me not to tell anyone else. I can't think of a way to deal with Zimmerman for the time being. Although I have the dragon beating stick in my hand, I can only run away from Zimmerman. Charlotte said, maybe he really has lost his memory. Don't worry too much, or find a few extraordinary people in the prophecy department to try to find his whereabouts. Antonio shook his head and said, I have already looked for it, and those prophets can't find any traces. It's like this person has disappeared from this world. Anne suddenly asked, have you checked whether anyone has left Kilmainham prison recently? He disappeared in the demiplane at the bottom of Kilmainham prison, but he may not be able to escape. Antonio suddenly became excited and said, I'll go check it out now. He didn't disturb Charlotte and Anne's world of 2 people anymore, and left in a hurry. This matter made the future strongest man of the empire very troubled, and he must find a way to solve this big crisis. At night, Charlotte sent Anne back to number 58 6th Avenue. Now the old Earl has moved out of here. Although he has not yet ascended the throne, he has already lived in the palace. After all, he has to deal with government affairs every day and control the power center of the empire. Now only Antonio and Anne live here. Charlotte watched Anne step into the gate. Just as she was about to turn around and leave, she suddenly had an idea and saw a very gentle man. Just like in the dreamland, he was gentle, young and gentle, and full of vicissitudes. He seemed to have experienced countless years and seen countless human scenes. Charlotte had seen the strongest blood clan many times in the dreamland, but she had never seen him in the real world. Juno walked past Charlotte like the wind, and suddenly he had a very beautiful box in his hand, with a decoration of the Arthur family on it. Juno smiled and said, "I'll give you a gift. But you have to open it when you are alone." The strongest vampire left gracefully after saying this. After Charlotte took it, she stroked the whisper of destiny, but got a meaningless sound. She put the gift away, wondering why Juno gave him a gift. Charlotte took the box and returned to 221B Baker Street. He opened the box and found a transparent crystal test tube inside. There was dark red blood inside, and there were faint gold runes in the blood, which were born and dyed at will, which was very beautiful. Charlotte immediately understood that this was Juno's blood. With it, she could use the secret rituals to reincarnate into Arthur's vampire without going through the first embrace. Charlotte took out a crystal test tube made of magic alchemy, and couldn't help but think of the Holy Light God's kingdom in her mind. He stroked the whisper of destiny again, but this time he got extreme pleasure, and the whisper of destiny urged him. Charlotte did not hesitate. Although the Holy Light God's kingdom seemed to have a big problem last time, the whisper of fate would never be wrong. If it also made a mistake, it would mean that the serpent of fate already hated him. Being hated by one of the 9 gods, no matter how cautious you are, it is useless to escape danger. The best choice is to die quickly. Charlotte passed through the infinite mirror realm and set foot on St. Michael's Island again. When he reached the 6th level of the maze, he found that the Holy Light God's kingdom had been completely renewed, just like a new one. Although the original ancient magic warship did not look dilapidated, the Holy Light God's kingdom at this moment even made people think that it could go to sea at any time. Charlotte released a flaming hand and sent Juno Arthur's blood to the head of the divine creature nailed to the bottom of the ship. The divine creature made a terrible sound. "Arthur! Arthur! Arthur!" The crystal test tube containing Juno Arthur broke, and not a drop of blood inside fell to the ground. All of it floated to the forehead of the divine creature, was absorbed by the divine creature, and directly penetrated into the skin. Charlotte looked at this scene in surprise. He vaguely felt that the blood of the Peak of Holiness might have different effects. Juno Arthur's blood might be better than the Count of Brittany, but not better in quality, but more suitable in properties. The divine creature named Amabella had a clear light flowing all over her body, and covered the hull of the Holy Light Kingdom with a thick layer of clear light. Under the cover of the clear light, this ancient magic warship continued to shrink, turned into a stream of light, flew into the air, and fell into the golden ring in Charlotte's hand. Charlotte raised her left hand. There were 3 golden rings. One of them was in Sophia Galinold's hand and was the key to controlling the queen bee. Another one devoured the body of St. Michael and turned into the whisper of fate. Its shape also became a golden snake connected head to tail. The last golden ring was the key to controlling the Holy Light Kingdom. Now it has become a ring shape formed by Amabella's body bending backwards, with her hands and toes touching. Although it was just a small ring, the body of Amabella, a divine creature, was still extremely graceful and full of temptation. Charlotte put it on her hand and muttered, "There are only 3 things left." She turned and left the 6th level maze. And also left St. Michael Island. Chapter 411 The greatest function of the blood butcher is to establish the original blood boundary. Every night, when Charlotte received training from Juno, the intensity suddenly doubled. He felt that he had made great progress every day, but every time he was in actual combat, he could rarely last more than 3 shots. What Charlotte did not realize was that Juno had already begun to suppress his strength at the 8th level and slowly improve it to the 10th level. On this day, Charlotte was tortured to death again. When he was knocked down by Juno's gun again, he was gasping for breath when he heard Juno smiling and saying, "The actual combat training of shooting will come to an end from today. It's time for us to move on to the next study." Charlotte was a little excited. Although he knew that the special training Juno gave him during this period was a precious time that tens of thousands of AQ might not be able to buy, he was really tired of being tortured. He felt relaxed all over when he could change to another training. Juno said, "Arthur's bloodline mantra has a total of 261 spells. You have already learned the entry-level bloodbath spell and blood explosion spell. It's time to go a step further and learn how to create a blood butcher. Arthur is a mage and is weak in close combat, so we developed gunfighting and blood butchers. Blood butchers are dogs, our shields, our minions, and the greatest guarantee of our lives. But do you know what the greatest role of blood butchers is? Charlotte shook her head to indicate that she didn't know. Juno said lightly, the greatest role of blood butchers is to set up the original blood boundary. Charlotte was immediately moved. The original blood boundary has always been known as the ultimate wall together with a glorious magic circle. Charlotte has seen the glorious magic circle, which Shivan alchemical explosives could not break. She has also seen the original blood boundary. The original blood boundary set up by the bloodline extraordinary around Jonathan made his magic-breaking armor bomb return in vain. He had thought about building a magic circle like this for himself, but he couldn't gather enough extraordinary people to set up a magic circle, nor did he have the corresponding secret method. Charlotte had many extraordinary orcs, but they practiced bloodthirsty fighting spirit, which could not push the original blood limit, and they didn't have the inheritance of defensive magic circles. Juno continued, when you have trained enough blood butchers and can set up the original blood boundary, with your strength, you will be able to fight even if you encounter a low-level saint. Juno began to explain how to condense the blood butcher's power seed, how to implant it into a warrior's body, and how to control the blood butcher through this special power seed. At this time, Charlotte suddenly had an idea and thought to herself, it is because of insufficient blood energy that I cannot activate the blood spirit. If I can really train a group of blood butchers and gather their power on myself, wouldn't it be possible to greatly increase the time I can use the blood spirit? If combined with the original blood boundary, I can indeed fight against the low-level saints, for example, Vigo, for example, Grand Priest Gusradin, but I guess it will still not work if I encounter a saint of the level of Harolf. Juno's explanation was very detailed. Charlotte learned halfway when she suddenly realized that something was wrong and asked, Teacher Juno, are you leaving? Juno smiled and said, the alliance has been formed. I should have gone back to Brown a long time ago. I wanted to train you for a while longer, but recently there was a mistake in Braun, and I have to go back to deal with it. I can't see my old friend ascend the throne. It's a bit regrettable. Charlotte fell silent and studied harder and harder. In addition to teaching the secret method of making the blood butcher, Juno also talked about a lot of Arthur's basic spells. He laid a very solid foundation for Charlotte. Although Charlotte knew that this strongest Blood Clan member hoped that she would be reincarnated as a vampire one day and become a member of the Blood Clan, she could not have any hatred towards this Blood Clan member. Although Charlotte knew that if she could not withstand the temptation, everything she had now would be away from her, including everything in Fars, such as Anne, the Knights of Favonius, a group of good friends, and the current power and status. Well, power and status are the least important. Becoming a vampire will never be able to return to being a human. Juno finished the last sentence and smiled slightly. Come to Baron to see me when you are free. Since I became a vampire, I haven't had any human friends visit me for a long time. That old guy Brittany refused to leave Fars. That guy Constantine will soon not be human. Charlotte couldn't help but chuckle, but soon she couldn't laugh anymore. Juno made light of these two things, but in fact, it revealed an extremely cold reality. Count Brittany would never dare to step into Baron, and the blood clan of Baron would definitely besiege him. As for Viscount Constantine becoming a vampire, it was a shocking thing to the old continent no matter how you look at it. Not to mention his identity as the strongest man in the Black Phoenix dynasty. This matter represents the fall of a great empire. The Black Phoenix is about to be divided. Charlotte opened her eyes. She came out of Juno's dreamland. The sun was shining in front of her. She came out a little later than usual. It was obvious that Teacher Juno had delayed the class. Charlotte sighed softly. She couldn't go to work again today. He stayed at 221B Baker Street for the whole morning. At noon, the door was opened from the outside. Anne pushed the key in and saw Charlotte's blank face. She couldn't help but smile and asked, "Why didn't you go to work today?" Charlotte laughed and said, "Then deduct my salary. You are a senior official in the Military Law Enforcement Department of the General Office of the Central Government. You are in charge of lateness, early departure, absenteeism and vacation." Anne pretended to take a document and said, "I will punish you now." "Oh. You don't seem to work in the general office. Tomorrow I have to let my father officially sign the document of your appointment as director." Although Charlotte became the highest authority in the general office of the central government because of her quick action, she actually had not yet received the appointment document of His Majesty the Emperor. There was no way. It was not that His Majesty Brittany refused to sign, but that His Majesty himself had not yet ascended the throne. The two joked for a while and went out to eat hand in hand. Although there is a team here to provide services for the two, Anne still likes to enjoy a meal quietly with Charlotte in an inconspicuous restaurant. Because it makes Anne feel that the world is very quiet and no one disturbs her and Charlotte. Anne actually likes this feeling. The two were in the restaurant, eating and chatting, when they suddenly heard a commotion on the street. A very imposing motorcade passed by the window. The family emblem on the motorcade was a golden pheasant. The two looked at each other and were surprised. This is the royal family, and judging from the size of the motorcade, this is a prince. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 412, I wonder if Lord Mecklen would be willing to change his surname to Axel and become my stepson? The old emperor had no brothers or sisters, but Axel was a big family. Just like Charlotte had only one brother and one sister, but the Mecklen family was a big family, with at least dozens of people. If Charlotte had property to pass on, she might give it to her daughter or her grandson, but unless she had none of them, she would not give it to her brother's children, let alone Zimmermann's illegitimate children. Of course, the Mecklen family and the Axel family were not the same thing. Charlotte whispered, "He seems to be going to the palace," and nodded. The two of them left the table together in tacit understanding. Charlotte left E4 and took Anne on the carriage. The carriage followed a convoy in front and soon drove into the palace. The Count of Brittany had long controlled the entire Strasbourg, as well as the inside and outside of the palace. Now the entire palace has been replaced by people from the Brittany family. So the prince's convoy was blocked outside the palace. Soon, a man who looked like a butler went to negotiate with the palace guards. The Brittany family guards would not let them go directly. They stopped the prince and sent someone to inform Antonio. Antonio was now in charge of everything in the palace. Charlotte and Anne did not follow the motorcade all the time. They got off the carriage, bypassed the motorcade, and arrived in front of the palace. This time, the palace guards looked at the two of them and let them in without even stopping them. The old butler who negotiated was furious and shouted, "Why can this young couple enter the palace at will, but our Prince Avery needs to wait?" Charlotte smiled and he also found it interesting. Not long ago, he was still a little clerk who might never have the opportunity to see the king in his life. Now he can enter and leave the palace at will, and he doesn't even need to be informed in advance. There is no way. Who made him hold Princess Anne in his hand? As for the prince, he will soon understand that this new dynasty is named Brittany, not Axel. Charlotte and Anne soon saw Antonio, who was hurrying over. He nodded slightly at them and said, "Come with me to pick up Prince A. Fury." Charlotte and Anne did not refuse this and followed Antonio out of the palace. On the way, Antonio did not forget to explain, saying, "I besieged Zimmermann with Prince A. Fury, but he was seriously injured and should have recovered from his injuries now." Charlotte asked curiously, "You talked about him last time, but what does he want to do? Why did he come back to Strasbourg? Is he here to seize the throne?" Antonio shrugged his shoulders and said, "I will let him know that he is really old." Antonio, who had the dragon beating stick in his hand, was afraid of Zimmermann and his father, but apart from these two people, there was no one in the empire who could threaten him. The three of them left the palace, and the old butler who was still arguing angrily suddenly stopped talking when he saw Antonio and retreated back to the caravan. A somewhat weak voice said, "Is that Antonio?" "I'm Avery." Antonio was slightly surprised, walked into the team, and opened the door of a carriage. Charlotte and Anne followed behind. Charlotte looked over Antonio's shoulder and saw a pale old man. He must have been seriously injured, and his breath was indescribably weak. Antonio asked, "How could you be like this? Who else in the world can hurt you?" After saying this, Antonio came to his senses and whispered, "Your Highness, please come with me to see my father." After the team entered the palace, they were arranged to rest. Only one carriage, under the protection of Antonio, went all the way to a palace in the palace. The old Count of Brittany had already received the news and welcomed them out of the palace. Charlotte and Anne followed in. It stands to reason that such secret things would be driven away by outsiders, and the old Count of Brittany would not let his daughter get involved in these things, but the old Count took a look at them and acquiesced to their existence. Prince A. Fury reluctantly got off the carriage, and his breath seemed very bad. The old Earl asked him to sit on the sofa and sent him a bottle of magic potion. The prince drank a bottle of magic potion with healing effect, and his complexion was slightly better. The old prince's first words surprised Charlotte. He said, "Don't worry, old friend, I was not injured by Zimmerman." The old Count of Brittany pondered for a moment and whispered, "I guessed it. If I met Zimmerman, I might be able to escape unscathed, but you would probably have to die in battle." This sentence was said in a domineering manner and did not give face to Prince A Fury, but the prince did not mind and said, "Yes. If I really met Zimmerman, I would definitely be beaten to death. I was beaten like this by Medefith. His territory is adjacent to mine. So he led his troops to attack my territory and wanted me to surrender to him. Of course I refused, and was severely injured in the duel. Fortunately, he was only Medefith, and he was also slightly injured. I took the opportunity to take my whole family out of the territory and return to Strasbourg. I probably won't be able to fight anyone for a long time. If I want to get my territory back, I can only pin my hopes on Your Majesty." Several people in the room breathed a sigh of relief. Prince A Fury did not come to seize the throne, but to seek refuge, which was very comforting. This prince was able to fight with Medefith and both sides suffered injuries. Although he might be worse than Antonio, he should be much stronger than the Golden Goat Rolf. As long as such a strong man recovers from his injuries, he will be the greatest help. Especially since this A Fury is the prince of the Axel family, he is willing to support the Count of Brittany, which can greatly increase the legitimacy of the Breton family's rule. The old Earl of Brittany patted Avery's hand and said, "When I ascend the throne, I will certainly seek justice for the prince. I will help you get compensation for all your losses from the territory of Medefith." Avery's mood really improved a little. He even asked, "What are the identities of Charlotte and Anne?" Knowing that Anne was the eldest daughter of Brittany, he praised her a few words. When asked about Charlotte's identity, the prince said cunningly, "I only have a daughter, no son. I wonder if Lord Mecklen is willing to change his surname to Axel and become my stepson." This question is very difficult to answer. Charlotte didn't know how to answer for a while. Changing surnames in this world is actually quite common. For example, Zimmerman changed his surname, and many married women also changed their surnames. The only difference is that the way they changed their surnames is to add an extra surname between their names, which is very strange. Charlotte's surname is Wong. But in fact her surname is Mecklen or Axel. He doesn't care much. But this is a political issue and is very sensitive. Chapter 413. Do you want to ride Miss Pumpkin? The old Earl of Brittany smiled and said, "We'll discuss this later." The future emperor made the final decision, and neither Prince Avery nor Charlotte had room to speak. Although Charlotte did not expect to change her last name, since her father-in-law had spoken, he was happy to say, "I will obey your Majesty's arrangements in everything." Prince Avery coughed twice. He was indeed injured, but he did not show that serious. He had heard of Charlotte and knew his great achievements. If Charlotte changed her last name to Axel, the Axel family might not be unable to fully support him to become emperor. Anyway, Anne really had the blood of the Axel family. However, the old earl obviously did not want to see the rotten things of siblings fighting, and decisively stopped Prince Avery's conspiracy. The old earl said to Antonio, "I deeply sympathize with Prince A Fury's experience. We can't do nothing. You and Charlotte, go and get Mossard's head back." Prince A Fury was slightly stunned, and then he showed an exaggerated expression, but in the end he said nothing. Charlotte was also quite surprised. Why did Medefith attack Prince A Fury's territory, but the old earl wanted to take Mossard's head? But he has recently acquired some military knowledge. After thinking about the territory of Duke Mossard, he suddenly realized it. Duke Mossard's territory is close to the Black Phoenix. Antonio's crusade against this duke can be used as a prelude to the four alliances dividing the Black Phoenix. On the contrary, Medefith's territory is in the hinterland of Fars and cannot be expanded at all, so he will attack Prince A Fury's territory of the same clan. After dividing the Black Phoenix, it will be in time to deal with Medefith. Charlotte and Antonio knelt on one knee and said, "We will not let down the Emperor's trust." Prince Avery coughed twice and said, "I am seriously injured and can no longer fight, but I can let my two daughters lead the way for Antonio and Charlotte." Prince Avery had been married 4 times and had a total of 8 daughters. Several of the older daughters had already married, but the 2 youngest daughters had not yet found a marriage partner. The prince certainly did not want his daughter to seduce Charlotte. To the prince, the most valuable thing about Charlotte was that she could marry Anne. Apart from that, she was worthless. His target was Antonio. If his daughter could marry Antonio, she would definitely be the future queen. The old Count of Brittany naturally knew the prince's plan. He smiled and did not refuse. He said, "You can set off today." Charlotte was not very interested in the prince's daughter, but he also saw that Prince A Fury seemed to be very interested in Antonio. He muttered in his heart, "His Majesty Brittany may not want his son to marry a descendant of Axel's blood." He followed Antonio out of the palace silently, but heard Anne whispered, "I want to go too." Anne didn't say anything just now because she was afraid that her father would stop her directly, but it would be much easier to make a request to Charlotte. She absolutely trusted her brother, but how could she trust Charlotte? Even if Charlotte had always behaved flawlessly, Anne would never allow any little goblin to approach her. Charlotte did not dare to hesitate and whispered, "Is Aunt Karen going back too?" Anne said, "She has to take care of many things. After my brother leaves, she will have to deal with all these things. She definitely can't go," Charlotte said decisively. "Then I will take everyone with me and make sure to protect you." Antonio went to the knights first to select people, and Charlotte also sent a signal. He has always had two saints protecting him secretly, but this time he wanted to take Anne to suppress the rebellion. He felt that two saints might not be enough, so he had to summon the other 5 saints. At the same time, he needed troops to suppress the rebellion, so he also had to transfer a Knights of Favonius. 10 minutes later, Antonio brought 20 knights. The army to suppress the rebellion would definitely not be stationed in the palace, so he had to go to the barracks. As soon as the two of them met, 2 knights, who looked quite heroic, followed the team. Charlotte only took a glance and knew that they were 2 female knights. After all, the body structures of women and men are different, and many postures are different. He only had a deep understanding of this kind of knowledge when he was trained by Juno Arthur. Juno once said that women have bigger flaws. After all, Anne was around, and Charlotte didn't dare to look at her anymore. He retracted his gaze and muttered in his heart, "These 2 princes' daughters don't look like pure girls." He couldn't help but say to Anne, "Do you want to ride Miss Pumpkin?" Anne was slightly surprised, but then asked, "How did you see that?" Charlotte was immediately scared and broke out in a cold sweat. He didn't dare to explain. This was the rich life experience of Charlotte Mecklen. He hurriedly whispered, "This is also for precautionary purposes. In case Antonio can't help it, some things can't be explained clearly." Anne pondered slightly and whispered, "Even if nothing happened, it's not easy for my brother to explain it clearly." She immediately called a royal guard and asked him to go to the Earl's mansion and bring her Miss Pumpkin over. Miss Pumpkin's cart-pulling beast is not a horse but a unicorn. The unicorn only allows pure girls to approach, so the choice of the unicorn as a magic beast to pull the carriage is often also a declaration of the purity of a family lady. Charlotte secretly regretted, thinking, "Why am I so talkative? Even if Antonio is involved, it is better than me being suspected by Anne, right? Fortunately I am smart. Antonio is a top saint, and he also has various supernatural powers." Of course, he heard Charlotte and Anne's whispers clearly, and he was immediately very grateful. He secretly said, "Fortunately, Charlotte has rich experience and can see such small details. Otherwise, I would have been calculated by Prince Avery this time." Well, the old Earl and the new Earl of Brittany are very clear about Charlotte's past. They also know in which aspect he has rich life experience. The 2 daughters of Avery didn't say much along the way. It is not known whether it was to maintain mystery or to play hard to get. However, when they saw Miss Pumpkin brought from the Earl's mansion, they almost subconsciously stayed away from the carriage. Antonio, Charlotte, and Anne looked at each other and smiled knowingly. Antonio and Charlotte Mecklen quickly joined their own forces. After leaving Strasbourg, the team became a mighty army of thousands of soldiers, full of murderous aura and showing the power of 100 battles. Chapter 414. Yes, every noble girl wants to have an aunt like this. Charlotte is a time traveler, and he firmly believes that a lion will do its best to catch a rabbit, not to mention that he will never allow Anne to be in danger, so he took out all his family assets, including 7 saints, Black Dragon, Golden Goat Roth, Ciudello, Vigo, former head of the Royal Knights Cresto and 2 former deputy heads Aspers and Regulus. In addition, Charlotte's Knights of Favonius are all maze guards, with at least 100 extraordinary people. Such a luxurious camp shocked Antonio, the new Count of Brittany, who will become the crown prince in a few days. This army was on a forced march after leaving Strasbourg, and it took only a few hours to walk 20 to 30 kilometers. Antonio is an authentic Saint Knight, and the army he brought is also the elite of the Brittany family. He is accustomed to this kind of forced march. Although Charlotte was not a qualified military strategist, he had experienced so many battles and was a high-level extraordinary person, so he had at least been tempered a little. The quality of the maze guards under his command was strong, and they didn't care much about this kind of forced march. And had Miss Pumpkin, a super carriage, which was much better than ordinary soldiers. They didn't think much of it, but some people couldn't stand it. The two Miss Axel were not extraordinary, and they rode horses to show their heroic spirit. Although Avery was a top saint and was willing to invest resources in his daughters, talent was too fair. He would never favor someone because of a noble. The old Earl of Brittany was a top saint, and his son was also top, but Anne. Well, in fact, Anne had already been promoted to a second-level dream environment walker. But after Miss Brittany found out that dear Mr. Charlotte Mecklen was already a high-level extraordinary, she never mentioned this good news. Although they were proficient in some martial arts, they really couldn't withstand such a forced march. They gritted their teeth and persisted at first, but soon they couldn't hold on any longer. The two girls secretly regretted not bringing a carriage with them. The elder sister Sarah couldn't help but said to her younger sister, "If we keep running like this, I'm afraid our legs will be blistered at night. I'm going to Antonio to ask for a carriage." The younger sister Renee couldn't hold on any longer and said, "I'll go with you." The two urged their horses and caught up with Antonio. Before they could speak, Charlotte said, "Antonio, Prince A Fury's territory has been invaded, and the two ladies are anxious, but you are traveling so slowly. Are you being urged by someone who has caught up with you?" Antonio suddenly felt a little ashamed and said, "How about I lead your holy ranks to fight the first battle first?" Charlotte nodded and said, "I can't give everyone to you. Anne still needs protection. You take Chidaro, Vigo, Aspris, and Regulus away." Antonio nodded and shouted, "Chudro, Vigo, Aspris, and Regulus, follow me first." He took off first, and the other four saints followed after Charlotte's hint. The two Miss Axel who caught up were about to bite their silver teeth to pieces. They looked at Charlotte with eyes full of angry flames. Charlotte didn't care anymore. He was a typical son-in-law of Brittany. What did he want to do by trying to please the Miss Axel? Charlotte shrugged her shoulders, released the dark luxury, and got on the carriage herself. If there weren't so many people, he would have gotten on Miss Pumpkin a long time ago. Anne couldn't stand it anymore, so she ordered the Knights of Brittany to give the two Miss Axel a military carriage. At night, Charlotte commanded the two armies to set up camp. The Brittany family really did set up a marching tent, but the structure was completely different from that on Earth. Charlotte brought Anne and made some simple barbecue to prepare a meal. The two were busy around them, and there were more than a dozen servants, all professionals who came from the Earl's mansion with Miss Pumpkin. The two Miss Axel in the carriage had been hungry for a long time, and they couldn't help it at this time, so they got off the carriage and walked into the tent. Charlotte greeted them very warmly. "Ladies, are you hungry too? I'm just about to get it done, and then call you." Anne smiled slightly. She knew Charlotte very well. Every time Charlotte forgot something and was pointed out, she would pretend not to see the accusation, but would make up for it very quickly, and then pretend that she had forgotten it before. Well, just like some online writers, when they forgot a certain plot and were pointed out by readers, they would be very obedient and pretend to be dead, and then in the subsequent creation, they would quickly bring back the forgotten plot and swear, "This is a foreshadowing." Well, this is very Charlotte. After all, the two young ladies of the Axel family were inexperienced in the world. They didn't expect that there was someone like Charlotte in this world. They couldn't get angry and could only sit aside silently. After Charlotte waited for the barbecue to be ready, she took out some small pancakes she brought with her and baked them. She rolled the vegetables and barbecue with them and ate them very sweetly. This is a common way of eating in his hometown. Vegetables help to dissolve greasiness, and pancakes can make the barbecue more textured. He ate until he was about 70% full, then found an excuse and left the tent. Even if Anne was there, Charlotte didn't want to be with the two young ladies of the Axel family. After Charlotte left, the two young ladies felt a little less pressure. Although Charlotte herself didn't feel it, in fact, he already had a very strong pressure on him. This was the momentum that naturally came from years of fighting and killing and being in charge of the army. Sarah put down her fork and said faintly, "Anne, do you know how many noble girls envy you?" Anne wiped her mouth with a napkin, smiled, and said, "Thanks to my aunt, if it weren't for her, I wouldn't have had a misunderstanding with Mr. Mecklen and met him. I originally thought that he was just an ordinary clerk and didn't think that he would have such great potential, Speaking of this, Anne herself was also very emotional. When she met Charlotte, Charlotte was indeed an outstanding little clerk. She had just been promoted to first-level clerk. She could only be considered ordinary and excellent, not promising. Anne didn't expect that Charlotte would suddenly become so outstanding. And every change seemed to be for herself. Well, it was for her, Anne de Bretagne. Sister Renee whispered, "I also want to have such an aunt." In the biography of Charlotte, this story was described in detail. Of course, Charlotte and Mrs. Sophie in the story were pure and flawless, and only Mr. Young Mills was a complete bad guy. Sarah added faintly, "Yes, every noble girl wants to have an aunt like this." Chapter 415 Dear Master Charlotte Mecklen, you really keep your promise. Anne Mecklen's novels were popular in the Old World, which led to Charlotte's reputation being almost comparable to the five great powers. Antonio, as the strongest of the next generation of Fars, may not be as famous as Charlotte Mecklen in various countries. Especially among the noble girls and even the noble ladies, Charlotte Mecklen's reputation crushed all the strong men in the Old World, and even in a sense, it surpassed the emperors of various countries. If Charlotte had not known Anne for a long time, he would have been treated unexpectedly in any country now, reported his name, and had his identity verified, such as being crawled into bed by a girl in the middle of the night. Sisters Sarah and Renee soon started chatting with Anne. Sarah still had a little fantasy about Antonio, but Renee liked Charlotte Mecklen in the novel more. In fact, the two girls were not stupid. Although Prince Avery had warned them in advance, they also tried to use small tricks such as riding horses to attract attention, but they knew that their hopes were not great. Antonio's attitude was especially so. Although it was Charlotte who came up with the bad idea, Antonio was no fool. How could he not see Charlotte's instigation? But he still left decisively, which showed that he really didn't mean that. As for Charlotte, well, the Empire's first Rose Mandelmann, Ingram's Grand Princess Maid Guillaume, and Strasbourg Rose, these famous beauties on the old road, were all killed by the smiling and charming Princess Anne in front of them. What virtue and ability did Sarah and Renee have? How could they compete with these beauties for the glory of the day? Anne didn't use any tricks to convince two not-so-powerful competitors. Charlotte left. In addition to wanting to get out of trouble, there was one more thing to do. He promised Amin to give him 500 evil crew members. Charlotte performed the light agility technique X10, ran more than 10 kilometers in one breath, and then stopped. He used his insight to observe that there was no one nearby, so he rubbed the Amabella ring on his hand and released the Holy Light Kingdom. This huge legendary warship appeared silently on the flat ground, pressing the nearby trees and long grass tightly to the ground. The divine creature Amabella did not move, but the light on her body was more blazing than the previous times. Charlotte waited patiently for a while, and then 500 Orkney's guards appeared and silently stepped onto the legendary warship. Charlotte took out the Saint Light Kingdom navigation log, and a line of handwriting soon appeared on it. Dear Master Charlotte Mecklen, you really keep your promise. Charlotte suddenly had a subtle feeling that he and the Holy Light Kingdom had reached a mysterious contract, but he didn't know the nature, content, and terms of the contract. He raised his left hand and was about to take the Holy Light Kingdom into it, when Amabella suddenly whispered, Charlotte Mecklen. Charlotte Mecklen. Charlotte was so scared that she broke into cold sweat. She took it by force, and the entire Holy Light Kingdom turned into a ball of light and flew into the golden ring. Charlotte whispered, this legendary warship is so weird, I wonder what it will become if I find the fangs of the sea serpent Vasuji, the tears of the king of the giant whale, and the branches of the ancient Medora tree. Charlotte quietly returned to the camp. Annie had already returned to Miss Pumpkin, but the two Miss Axel had not returned to the carriage. When they saw Charlotte, the two Misses' eyes lit up slightly, but Charlotte said hello to them and got on the dark luxury. He had to practice at this time every day, and didn't want to waste time chatting with irrelevant people. Charlotte used Bloody Glory and practiced for more than half an hour. When all the blood energy condensed under the ribs on the back, the 11th blood vortex quietly took shape. Bloody Glory can condense 13 blood vortices. Charlotte condensed 9 in total. The other 2 blood vortices were not recorded in the Protagoras scroll. They were other adventures he got. After opening this blood vortex, Charlotte's blood energy increased slightly again, from the 15th level to the 16th level. According to the strength of the blood clan, the 13th to 15th level is the blood clan Baron, and the 16th to 18th level is the blood clan Viscount. Now, in terms of pure level, He has also surpassed the Baron Leo he met that year. In terms of strength, Charlotte is not even afraid of the top high-level extraordinary. The level is only determined by the strength of energy. The strength of actual combat depends on the mastered supernatural power. The supernatural power mastered by Charlotte now is far beyond the ordinary high level. After gathering the 11th bloody glory, Charlotte was delighted. He reversed all the 11 bloody glory and gathered them in his throat. A bloody rune that had already taken shape suddenly condensed and fell on a thick book with a black cover and countless broken gold runes. This is the Blood Butcher's seed. Generally speaking, a decent vampire can also practice it, but almost no one will practice it. It will only be implanted into the body of a blood servant. Charlotte pushed open the dark and luxurious door and saw that the camp was quiet. Only the soldiers on night watch were still energetic. He did not disturb these soldiers on night watch and called a former Golden Goat pirate over. This former pirate was called the Sea Snake King, one of the 5 deputy leaders, a 13th level extraordinary person, who had already entered the ranks of high-level extraordinary people and was quite powerful. However, he did too many bad things, and Charlotte could not tolerate it, so he transformed him into Maze Guard. Although the Sea Snake King was reincarnated as a Maze Guard and turned into a kind of evil spirit, he still retained his extraordinary wisdom. When he saw Charlotte take out a broken gold rune, he slightly resisted, but finally accepted the Blood Butcher seed. Charlotte stared at him for a while, and saw that the former vice-captain of the pirate group had a slight red glow all over his body. His body seemed to have undergone some changes, but they were not obvious. Transcendents generally do not willingly become blood servants. Vampires generally look for ordinary people with strong physical fitness, turn them into blood servants, and train them to become transcendents. Juno told Charlotte that if the transformation is of a low-level transcendent, the process may take more than 10 days or even several months, and the transformation time of a mid-level transcendent will be longer. As for high-level transcendents, even vampires find it difficult to find such blood servants. High-level transcendents are important figures in major empires. Even if some people have a bad fate and have not yet obtained a high position, their future is limitless, and they will never be blood servants. Even a saint like Juno would only lure the other party to become a formal vampire. After all, talents are rare, and it is impossible to waste them like Charlotte. Charlotte was slightly disappointed. He knew that he had taken it for granted. Chapter 416, Oslo Kingdom Coalition. The blood servants of vampires are elites who have been trained for more than 10 years. They are not only auxiliary personnel in combat, but also serve as housekeepers and loyal servants. Although they have always been treated as dogs by vampires, they are not abandoned at any time. At the beginning, Lord Leo even went back to Machu Picchu once to save the blood servants, and was almost trapped in it. As a time traveler, Charlotte has a natural problem in his mentality. Morality makes him not indifferent to any life, but the sense of alienation makes it difficult for him to have identification with the same kind with strangers and enemies. He may not take blood servants as seriously as the regular vampires. When he was studying with Juno, he accidentally overlooked this point. It was determined that a group of maze guards could not be quickly transformed into blood servants. This was obviously a major project that would take at least a few years to complete. Charlotte temporarily gave up on continuing to create blood butchers. After letting the Sea Serpent King rest, Charlotte returned to the dark luxury, and this time he fell asleep quickly. When he got up the next morning, Charlotte led the team to continue on their journey. The Dukedom of Mossad borders the South Seraph War Zone, both of which are on the border of the Black Phoenix dynasty. When Duke Mossad was young, he also fought many battles with the army of the Black Phoenix dynasty and made countless contributions to the Fars Empire. Several nearby noble territories, because they are on the border and border the Black Phoenix dynasty, are often troubled by war, but they are not strong enough and have to turn to Mossad frequently to get the military support of the Duke in order to gain a foothold in the border area. Therefore, when Mossad asked them to join the Kingdom of Oslo, these noble territories could not refuse. At this time, Fars was deeply involved in the war, and they all felt that Strasbourg could not provide any assistance. Mossad did not even need to attack them. As long as he announced the next attack of the Black Phoenix dynasty and did not provide any assistance, these nobles would be destroyed by the Black Phoenix army. When Charlotte led the army to the border of the Kingdom of Oslo, he found that it had become a large barracks. Antonio, who arrived one step earlier, tried to break into the camp several times, but was repelled by Mossad. When the former Duke of the Empire, now the King of Oslo, was promoted to the Saint rank, he chose to condense the King's certificate and became a 10,000 Knights captain. With the natural leadership of a 10,000 Knights captain and the help of the family Knights, Mossad increased his strength several times, even to a level slightly better than Antonio. Thanks to Antonio's dragon beating stick and the assistance of 4 saints, he was able to retreat calmly every time in several encounters. Antonio felt a little ashamed when he saw Charlotte. He said, "I fought with Mossad several times. He relied on the help of the Knights and only defended but did not attack. I failed to defeat him. It's just right that you are here. The 8 of us, the saints, can defeat his Knights together." Although Charlotte felt that this method was a bit clumsy, she did not raise any objections. After all, there were 8 saints on their side. Except for Vigo, who was slightly weaker and only at the 19th level. The rest of the Black Dragon, the Golden Goat Roth, Ciudelo, Asperis, and Regulus were at the 22nd level. Antonio and Cresto were the top saints at the 23rd level. With such a strong strength, why bother with any tactics? Just push forward. Charlotte even handed over the command and let Antonio play on his own. He took Anne and the 2 ladies of the Axel family away from the battlefield. Antonio received Charlotte's full support, and his confidence doubled. He chose to attack with his entire army. The 2 knights mixed together and headed straight for Mossad's camp. After Mossad's rebellion, he was worried about the revenge of the old Earl of Brittany. He not only gathered the family knights together, but also formed the Oslo Kingdom coalition and gathered 6 saints. He believed that the newly established Oslo Kingdom was strong enough to counter the expeditionary force from Fars. He didn't know that the 4 countries had already made a new covenant, and thought that Fars was fighting with Byron and could not do his best to deal with the Oslo Kingdom for the time being. Who would have thought that Antonio would come to the door in less than a month? The continuous battles also exhausted the Duke physically and mentally. He had just defeated Anthony and was about to rest when he heard a landslide and tsunami outside. He hurriedly carried his knight's spear and left the camp. Seeing Antonio with 7 saints and a surging army, he was shocked. He shouted and soared into the air, his whole body bursting with black fighting spirit. The knights below also urged their fighting spirit and combined it with the aura of their Lord Duke. A black military flag was condensed behind Mossad, waving in the sky. The commanders of the other 7 noble knights saw the scene and responded one after another. 6 rays of light soared into the air one after another. Among them, 2 saints of the Kingdom of Oslo also connected with the aura of their own knights, evolving into a majestic flag. Antonio had chosen the Mossad family knights as his target several times before when he broke into the camp. The other knights of the Kingdom of Oslo did not intervene, and these nobles also wanted to wait and see. But this time Antonio brought 7 saints and thousands of elite knights. If they did not react, they would be crushed by Antonio's attack. Once the army collapsed, there would be no chance to save it. These nobles could only grit their teeth and fight. The 2 sides rushed together in an instant. Antonio and Mossad exchanged a move. Antonio held a dragon stick and shouted majestically, "Mossad, if you are willing to surrender, I can represent His Majesty and forgive the past." Mossad gritted his teeth and cursed, "What are you lying to, kid? I killed the king with Hongmere. Even if Brittany is unwilling to pursue, how can the Axel family and the other nobles let Mossad go?" Antonio knew that Duke Mossad was telling the truth. Even if the old Earl of Brittany did not want to pursue, the other nobles would not let go of Hongmere and Mossad, the rebellious and regicide partners. The Emperor's majesty cannot be violated. Even though the Emperor was dead and the dynasty had to change its surname, the Emperor was still the Emperor, representing the orthodoxy of Fars. Unless Hongmere ascended the throne, the Mossad family had no way out. Both sides urged their fighting spirits and slammed into each other fiercely, fighting for dozens of rounds in an instant. Cresto slowly drew out his sword, ready to cooperate with Antonio. As the Grand Master of the Royal Knights, a top-level saint of the 23rd Order, his strength was not inferior to Antonio and the King of 10,000 Lions, a Misfitus, and he even had a record of repelling a Misfitus. This was a war, not a duel, so he didn't mind fighting with Antonio. Chapter 417, Holy Mountain of Light. Cretus's secret weapon, Sigh of the Radiant God. Of course Mossad knew Cresto. He, Cresto, and Midafis were among the top 5 of the 3 heroes of the old generation of the Fars Empire. Now, 20 or 30 years have passed, and the top 5 have made progress. Cresto and Midafis are younger, and the progress is faster. They have both entered the 23rd level. Grand Duke Robin, Duke Mussard, and Grand Duchess Misu are older, but they are behind. They are all the 22nd level strong holy level. Cresto is nicknamed the Holy Mountain of Light. He is an authentic shining knight. He is loyal to the old king, and as the Grand Master of the Royal Knights, he is also in a high position and has a status not even lower than that of the Minister of War, Count Galanod. If Julius Axel had not been killed and the main force of the Royal Knights had not been transferred, Crestus would have urgently needed someone to support the king, and he felt that it was only a temporary loyalty, so he would never have defected to Charlotte. Charlotte was not qualified to accept the loyalty of such a big man. But with the Count of Brittany ascending the throne, Charlotte became the Count of Mechlin, and Cretus could only accept this result silently. After all, the old Count of Brittany ascended the throne and would never reorganize the royal knights belonging to Axel. Cretus raised his sword high, and a strange light burst out from his body, rushing straight into the sky. Mussard's soul was in a state of panic. How could he not recognize the ultimate move of Cretus, the holy mountain of light, the sigh of the glorious god? Throughout the entire old world, the only glorious knight who could use this move was Cretus. Mussard couldn't help but roared, "Gareth! Help me!" A knight who was fighting with a golden goat Rolf looked back at Mussard, let out a long roar, got rid of the old goat, and pointed his sword directly at Cretus. Cretus sneered and shouted, "Gareth! You are not my opponent." Gareth is Mussard's younger brother and one of the 7 nobles he gathered to rebel. Gareth remained silent, and his whole body turned into a black light, like a giant dragon with bared fangs and claws. Cretus swung his hand back, and a blazing light band rolled up. Facing such a powerful attack, Gareth's sword flashed, and although he blocked the attack, he was pushed back by the light band. Although Cretus was distracted when he launched this attack, he still continued the sigh of the glorious god to its peak. Just as he was about to continue to launch this attack, Gareth's body suddenly twisted and turned into a ball of smoke. The light band emitted by Cretus passed through the ball of smoke like a sharp blade cutting through water. Holy Mountain of Light Cretus was slightly stern, and shouted, "You actually summoned the evil god." Mussard laughed wildly and said, "That's right, you are all going to die." The smoke that Gareth turned into was like a hole in the center of the smoke, and thick smoke gushed out almost infinitely. The smoke became thicker and thicker, and finally turned into a huge ball hundreds of meters. Cretus froze the attack that was about to be launched. If this sigh of the glorious god was launched, his strength would at least drop by 1 level. Facing the evil god who was about to descend, he had to maintain his peak combat power, otherwise he would not be able to cope with the next battle. Even Antonio slightly retracted his dragon beating stick and distanced himself from Mussard. The saints who were fighting in the sky also tried their best to move the battlefield farther away. Even the saints of the kingdom of Oslo would worry that Mussard would sacrifice them. What can't people who can summon evil gods do? Charlotte looked at the smoke in the center of the battlefield from afar, and felt a slight sense of familiarity in his heart. Well, he was sure that this breath was not any of the evil gods he had faced before. Charlotte thought to himself, "Why do I feel familiar when I see a strange evil god? I can't possibly be familiar with them." Only a small number of maze guards were left beside Charlotte. He waved his hand and shouted, "Get out of the battlefield." He was responsible for protecting Annie and the 2 Miss Axel. Nothing could happen to these 3 ladies. Besides, he couldn't participate in the battle at all. This was a holy level battle, and there was no room for high-level transcendence to intervene. Charlotte released a magic mirror and asked his maze guards to protect Annie and the 2 Miss Axel to escape from the battlefield first, but he stayed. In the smoke, there was suddenly a strange bright light, and a huge fire giant appeared in the center of the smoke. Charlotte screamed, "Enlulu!" Now he knew why he felt that this cloud of smoke was familiar. He had not seen this evil god, but he had seen believers of this evil god. The young man named Mortensen Tim, who had luckily mastered the power of the fire evil god Enlulu, not only obtained the status of an evil god candidate, but also had to participate in the evil god arena in 6 months. Charlotte did not expect that she would have the opportunity to see the 3rd evil god. Well, Juno does not count. Although his teacher is already very close to the god level. Antonio yelled, "Fight!" The dragon beating stick in his fighting spirit resonated strongly, and slammed into the descending clone of Enlulu. There are 9 righteous gods in the old world, and the evil god of the new world cannot descend in his true form. Antonio thought to himself that he was not incapable of a fight. Cretus's sword burst into light, and sent out a great glorious cross slash, which landed on Honolulu's huge body almost at the same time as Antonio's dragon beating stick. Antonio went straight through the huge body of the fire evil god, but his body was full of fireworks. Obviously, passing through the body of the evil god was not pleasant. Kratos' great glorious cross slash, still like a sharp blade cutting through water waves, silently penetrated the huge body of the fire evil god Honolulu. However, the holy mountain of light waved his hand, and the great glorious cross slash returned in the air. He sent out a second great glorious cross slash, and combined with the previous attack, the power suddenly increased by 70% to 80%. Antonio activated his fighting spirit, and layers of mist appeared on his body, clearing away all the fireworks on his body. He also changed his fighting style. There were countless mists outside his body, condensing into balls of smoke. He was not only an authentic knight, but also a dark moon warlock of the highest level. He combined magic and martial arts, and his means of dealing with the enemy were prosperous and diverse. Antonio just didn't like to use the whistle trick, but it didn't mean he didn't know how to use it. Antonio and Kratos joined forces to fight the incarnation of the fire evil god Honolulu summoned by Gareth. The rest of the holy ranks hurriedly withdrew from the camp of the Oslo Kingdom coalition. Without Antonio, they couldn't withstand Mossad, who could drive the power of the entire knights. Mossad laughed wildly. He could only stay in the camp several times under Antonio's attack, but at this time he shouted and urged the entire knights to attack. The war reached its most intense level in an instant. Chapter 418 Omibella opened her eyes. Charlotte saw this scene and thought to himself, not good. If the knights of Mossad are attacked, the maze guards I brought will all be finished. Of course, the knights of Brittany will also be finished. When the two knights were completely destroyed, no matter how the Holy Order war went, this time the discussion would end in failure. Charlotte activated the light speed technique X10 almost instantly and ran all the way. If the knights want to charge, they must gather together. Before the knights of the Mossad family gathered and started to charge, Charlotte rushed into the coalition of Brittany and the knights of Favonius, and shouted, "Don't panic. Listen to my orders and get on board." Charlotte touched the golden ring on his hand and threw the Holy Light Kingdom directly to the battlefield between the two armies. He still couldn't drive this legendary warship, but it was no problem for him to get on board. The charging knights of the Mossad family were shocked when they suddenly saw such a huge ship appear on land. As the knights in front approached the Holy Light Kingdom, they heard a thought resounding in their minds, Pendragon. 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 Omibella, who was nailed to the bottom of the ship alive, opened her eyes. The last time this divine creature opened its eyes, Charlotte felt the danger and fled without hesitation, but he couldn't escape this time. After all, he still had to save the soldiers of the two knights. Even though the knights of Favonius came this time with the maze guards, he didn't want to sit back and watch them perish. With a strange thought echoing in her ears, Pendragon. 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 Charlotte could only activate Bloody Glory to protect herself and command the two knights to board the ship. He didn't know what would happen after boarding the ship, so he could only shout loudly, "Don't get close to the magic circle on the bow. If you touch that magic circle, you will die. Stay on the deck and don't go to any cabin." Charlotte was able to manipulate part of the majestic power of the Holy Light Kingdom. The knights of the Brittany family and the knights of Favonius boarded the ship, and there was no danger for the time being. However, if the knights of the Mossad family approached the clear light shrouding the Holy Light Kingdom, they would turn into a blood mist and be swallowed by this legendary warship. Mossad was going crazy. He could never imagine that someone would bring a legendary warship to land. The Holy Light Kingdom was a legendary warship in the first major version era. Now the legendary warship has been upgraded to the third major version. Mossad had not paid attention to the old documents, and for a while he could not recognize which legendary warship it was. He hurriedly stopped the knight's charge, reactivated the leader's power of the 10,000 riders, and with the help of the knight's power, he launched a shocking blow. This attack landed on the Holy Light Kingdom, shaking the clear light covering the warship. The well became stronger and stronger, and kept roaring Pendragon. 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 This will was infused into everyone's mind and echoed endlessly. The saints who were fighting fiercely in the sky were also shocked when they saw this scene. Even Antonio, who was most familiar with Charlotte, couldn't help but shout, "Where did you get this legendary warship?" Charlotte shouted, "St. Michael Island." Although he knew the discovery side of the Holy Light God, Antonio still couldn't understand it. He shouted, "How can there be a legendary warship on St. Michael Island? Doesn't it only have one queen bee?" Charlotte shouted, "It's the Holy Light God. When the battle is over, you can go to the library of Sheffield University to check the information." Antonio dodged the attack of the flame evil god Enlulu. Even though he was a top-level saint, he didn't want to take a hard hit on the fireball spewed by the flame evil god. He didn't have time to continue asking Charlotte, so he urged the dragon fighting stick and continued to fight. Mossad launched 2 consecutive critical strikes, but he couldn't blast away the clear light shrouding the Holy Light God. He immediately changed his target of attack, struck casually, and sent out a pure fighting spirit, rushing towards Charlotte. Charlotte activated the Lightspeed XX10 without hesitation and rushed onto the Holy Light Kingdom. Charlotte now understood why the Golden Goat Rolf, who had a legendary battleship in his hands, was not afraid of even Zimmerman. The attack launched by Mossad, with the power of the family knights, could not break the defense wall of the Holy Light Kingdom in one blow. Even though Charlotte responded quickly, the Knights of the Brittany family and the Knights of Favonius still suffered heavy losses. Under Mossad's crazy attack, there were casualties. Antonio and Cretus were tripped by the clone of Enlulu, the evil god of fire summoned by Gareth. The holy ranks brought by Charlotte could not resist Mossad, who commanded the knights. In Charlotte's previous battles, she tried not to lose anyone if she could, and she would fight a tacit war if she could. It was the first time that he saw his soldiers die in large numbers. He felt sad and looked up at Mossad in the sky, shouting, "Mossad, one day, I will wipe out every person with the last name Mossad. I will make your family disappear from this world. I swear to the 9 gods, if I can't do this, I will give up the name Mecklen." Although Mossad was a powerful saint, he still felt a slight chill on his back when he heard Charlotte's oath. If it was an ordinary high-level extraordinary, he would definitely sneer at it, but Charlotte Mecklen was different. This guy was a person who could make his beloved girl be written into history. After Mossad knew about Charlotte's deeds, he even felt a little jealous. He couldn't understand anything he said. How could Charlotte do those incredible things? At this time, Charlotte swore to the 9 gods. Even though Mossad had been through hundreds of battles and was one of the top 5 of the old Fars, he was still a little afraid and shouted, "In this case, I will kill you first." Charlotte stood on the deck of the Holy Light God and shouted, "Do you have this ability?" Mossad was slightly speechless. If he commanded the knights to continue the attack, he would have a 70% to 80% chance of destroying this legendary warship within an hour or two, but on the battlefield, where would he be allowed to waste his energy like this? Mossad shouted loudly, "Gareth, attack this warship." The fiery red clone of the flame evil god, which was spitting out flames and burning half of the sky, slowly turned its huge body and pressed down on the Holy Light God with one palm. Antonio and Cretus rushed to attack. But their actions could only consume the energy of the clone of the flame evil god, but could not seriously injure it. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 419, Pendragon's Daughter. The Holy Light God Kingdom was hit. The clear light that enveloped this legendary warship suddenly dimmed, and then a thought was heard, resounding through the world, "Enlulu. Enlulu. Enlulu." The fire evil god, whose body was almost as huge as the Holy Light God Kingdom, suddenly froze. Then Amabella was heard to make countless sounds that were not uttered by human brutes. These sounds condensed into countless broken gold runes in the void. These runes were chaotic and gathered into a torrent, rushing towards Enlulu. Countless fireworks gushed out, and the two were both extremely evil existences. The two unmatched evil forces collided fiercely. Mossad watched helplessly as the formation of his knights was broken up by the two evil forces. Those unfortunate Mossad family knights either ignited fireworks on their bodies or turned into a cloud of blood mist and floated towards the Holy Light God Kingdom. In just a moment, Mossad's family knights suffered heavy losses. He roared wildly, feeling extremely distressed. Without the family knights, he was left with only his own strength. Mossad had already lost a group of elite family knights in Strasbourg. Now if he put this knight group in, even if he won temporarily, he would not be able to resist the next crusade. He could only try his best to gather the knights and desperately withdraw from the battlefield. Charlotte took the opportunity to gather the remaining remnants of the Brittany Knights and the West Wind Knights on the Holy Light Kingdom. Although he could not operate this legendary warship and the Holy Light Kingdom could not sail on land, it was a fixed fortress with strong defense. Seeing that most of the Brittany Knights and the West Wind Knights had entered the Holy Light Kingdom, Vigo also flew down from the sky. Charlotte also opened a channel for him to let the Saint in. This battle was too difficult for the Flame Paladin. He always felt that he was the only one at level 19 on the battlefield. Vigo even suspected that there might not be anyone at level 20 on the battlefield. Almost every enemy was stronger than him. If it weren't for the friendly saints who were also good and could help him, Vigo felt that he might have died long ago. He landed on the deck and said breathlessly, "This is the most difficult battle in my life." Charlotte said lightly, "Such battles in the future will probably be common." Vigo suddenly had the urge to cry. He was willing to bet his life in exchange for Hughes's survival. In fact, a very important point was that he was tired of fighting. But he never thought that after he defected to Fars, the battle would escalate violently. Whether in South Seraph or on the battlefield of Felindon, Vigo had never encountered such a brutal battle. It's not uncommon for the saints to fight, but there are 22nd and even 23rd level warriors everywhere, the commander of the knights, the large group of summoning evil gods, and the legendary warships that have been brought to the land. This has never happened in Felindon. Vigo looked up at the sky and found something sad. It seems that his withdrawal from the battle did not affect the battle. The friendly side did not fall into disadvantage because of the loss of a saint. On the contrary, because they did not need to take care of him, several saints were full of energy and let go. He felt for the first time that the 19th level might not be considered a real saint. Just as Charlotte was about to say something, he felt a slight warmth in his arms. He took out his diary and turned to the logbook of the Holy Light Kingdom. A line of words soon appeared on it. "Dear Master Charlotte Mecklin, I also want to devour the dead in battle." Charlotte was slightly surprised, and then silently replied, "Okay." Amun was obviously happy, and a line of words appeared on the logbook of the Holy Light Kingdom. "Dear Master Charlotte Mecklin, then I will eat." 3 exclamation marks appeared on the paper, revealing Amun's emotions vividly. Charlotte has never figured out the relationship between Amun, Amabella, and the Holy Light Kingdom. Amabella is obviously not the soul of this ship. She was just used as material to build this legendary battleship. Amun is not like the ship spirit of this legendary battleship. He is more like the first mate of this ship. Charlotte has wanted to ask Amun several times about the relationship between them and what Amun's origin is. But every time he had this thought, the whisper of fate would frantically remind him not to commit suicide. Although Charlotte didn't know what the consequences would be if he asked these questions, he still decisively gave up the temptation to satisfy his curiosity. After all, if curiosity would bring danger, then the questions that aroused curiosity would not be so important. After Charlotte agreed to Amun, countless bloodbats suddenly flew out of this legendary battleship. Charlotte was horrified, because he could sense that these bloodbats did not come from anything else, but from that group of maze guards. Even Charlotte didn't know what these maze guards were now. But they were definitely more evil than maze guards. They could even differentiate a part of flesh and blood from their bodies and evolve into bloodbats. Charlotte looked at the bloodbats all over the sky. Now he knew what Amun wanted 500 evil crew members for. These bloodbats flew out of the Holy Light Kingdom, flying around this legendary battleship, devouring the souls that had just died in the battle, and some of the bloodbats fell to the ground, making rustling sounds, chewing the soldiers who died on both sides. These bloodbats are not the bloodbat technique that Charlotte practiced, and they seem too weird. Charlotte even saw a group of bloodbats chasing the retreating Mossard knights, and even rushed into the knights, biting dozens of Mossard's soldiers. Although Duke Mossard had never seen such a weird thing, he was furious and killed these bloodbats casually, but the soldiers bitten by the bloodbats turned black all over and died on the spot. Obviously, this batch of bloodbats is highly toxic, and even if they are killed, they can't save the soldiers. Mossard was secretly panicked. He didn't know what Charlotte had released. Why is this battleship so weird? He stared at the Holy Light God's kingdom, and suddenly remembered something, and exclaimed, "It's her, it's Amabella, the daughter of Pendragon, the blood ancestor of Arthur. How could she be nailed to the bottom of the ship and made into a ship? Who is so bold?" He actually used the daughter of the evil blood god as material to build a warship. Mossard was shocked to the point of being unable to control himself. He remembered the oath he had just made when he wiped Charlotte's face, and suddenly felt that the Mossard family might have provoked a very difficult enemy. Chapter 420 The evil god is also a god. To be precise, Amabella is not the biological daughter of Pendragon Arthur, the ancestor of Arthur. She is the third descendant of the ancestor of the Blood Clan, and one of the 19 descendants created by Pendragon through the first embrace. Mosserd didn't understand who was so bold that he dared to nail one of the 3 royal families of the Blood Clan, the ancestor of Arthur, and the daughter of the old evil god, to the bottom of the ship to create a legendary warship. Mosserd, who dared to rebel and kill the emperor with Redmire, never thought of doing such a brave thing. He glanced at Antonio, and then stared at Charlotte standing on the deck. Suddenly, he had a feeling that Charlotte might really have a way to fulfill the oath she made and exterminate the Mosserd family. Mosserd snorted coldly and strangled this absurd idea. Compared with the illusory feeling, he believed more in the knight's lance in his hand. On the battlefield, the Holy Order is no longer the main force. The Holy Light God Kingdom and the Flame Evil God each raised their evil power. One agitated endless smoke mixed with flames, and the other kept spewing out endless broken gold runes. As for the blood bats, after eating up all the edible things on the battlefield, they all quietly flew back to the Holy Light God Kingdom and merged into the bodies of the maze guards. When Charlotte saw the blood bats flying back, he did not hesitate to find the maze guards scattered all over the Holy Light God Kingdom, grabbed a few at random, and urged the bloody glory to explore their bodies. After Charlotte explored 70 or 80 maze guards, his face became very ugly. He encountered obstacles when trying to transform the Sea Snake King into a blood servant. The 500 maze guards he sent to the Holy Light God Kingdom have now begun to transform into blood servants. Although this is because none of the maze guards he sent to the Holy Light God Kingdom were extraordinary, they were all ordinary orcs, and it would be very easy to transform, but it also shows the evil of this legendary battleship. Charlotte took a deep breath and thought to herself, it must have something to do with the Blood Clan, and it must be related to Arthur. Charlotte was on the Holy Light God, but she didn't hear Mosserd shouting on the battlefield far away, otherwise he would definitely be surprised. After Charlotte investigated dozens of evil crew members, his heart moved slightly, and he injected the Blood Butcher's seat into several of them. He planned to spend a few days to implant the Blood Butcher's seat into all 500 evil crew members on the Holy Light God, and then see the effect. At this time, the 5 saints on the side of the Kingdom of Oslo also withdrew from the battle. They didn't want to fight side by side with the evil god. The consequences of summoning the evil god are very serious, very serious. If you say that rebellion is to be an enemy of the emperor, summoning the evil god is to be an enemy of the 9 righteous gods. Rebellion will only be resisted by the nobles, but summoning the evil god will be surrounded and suppressed by the priests of the 9 righteous gods. Almost everyone in the old world knows that the power group with the most saints is never the royal family of any empire, but the priests of the 9 righteous gods. Most of these priests who do not care about worldly affairs and practice hard will be favored by the righteous gods and have a spiritual increase in their practice. At this time, the 5 saints have regretted it slightly. Antonio and Kratos did not withdraw from the battle, but continued to stimulate their fighting spirit to wear down the evil god power of Anilulu, who was summoned. If the evil god wants to come, it will not be without cost. As long as Charlotte and the others continue to fight, sooner or later the evil god's power will be backfired. While the black dragon was emitting a sort of fighting spirit, following Antonio and Kratos to dissipate the evil power of the incarnation of the flame evil god, he secretly thought, the evil god is also a god. It can be used as the core of a divine weapon. The blood spirit of the Mechren family master is only a saint-level item, but if it can swallow the incarnation of the flame evil god, it may not be impossible to leap to the next level. The old lizardman joined Charlotte and believed that he could lead the orcs out of the wilderness. Moreover, Charlotte did a good job. Not only did he treat the orcs equally, but he also wanted to promote a beast god transformation technique to eliminate the gap between humans and orcs. This was a genius idea. Moreover, he now had 7 saint-level people serving him. He was simply a saint king who walked out of the long river of history. If the old Earl of Brittany was not Anne's father, and the love between Charlotte and Anne was like a legend, known to everyone in the entire old continent, the Black Dragon would have wanted to instigate Charlotte to accumulate strength and prepare for a rebellion. Now he is trying to find ways to let Charlotte occupy a piece of land that belongs to him and build a country that integrates humans and orcs. Charlotte must master power. This is the clearest cognition of the Black Dragon. All policies and all concepts must be promoted with a sword. If there is no power, no matter how civilized and advanced a concept is, it will be defeated by the wilderness. The Black Dragon suddenly withdrew from the battle and shouted, "Master Mechlin, "Give me the blood spirit rhinoceros." Charlotte threw the blood spirit rhinoceros without hesitation. The black dragon grabbed the blood spirit rhinoceros. Although he was not the owner of this holy level wonder, he was a powerful holy level after all. The bloodthirsty fighting spirit infused his whole body, making the blood spirit rhinoceros bloom with strange light, and suddenly crashed into the incarnation of the flame evil god Enulu. This holy level wonder was not afraid of the poisonous smoke and flames emitted by the incarnation of the evil god. It turned around in Enulu's huge body, creating lines of fire. Enulu, composed of flames and smoke, pierced countless holes in the huge body. Although these holes were closed immediately, and it seemed that the incarnation of the evil god was not hurt, the black dragon still enjoyed it. The blood spirit rolled countless times, and suddenly it stagnated slightly and hit the real object. The black dragon was overjoyed and shouted, "Antonio, Kratos! Help me!" His bloodthirsty fighting spirit burst out, and the magic sword in his hand was shining. He rushed into the incarnation of the blood flame evil god regardless of everything. Antonio was shocked. He had experienced many battles and immediately understood the black dragon's tactics. The person who controlled the flame evil god and summoned Enulu was Gareth. As long as Gareth hiding in the body of the flame giant was found, the flame evil god could be broken with one blow. However, Gareth's strength was no less than that of the old lizard man. It would be extremely dangerous for the black dragon to break into the huge body of Enulu. He urged the dragon beating stick and shouted, "Kratos, let's open a passage for the black dragon." The two of them, the top saints of the 23rd level, joined forces to guarantee a retreat for the black dragon. Although Black Dragon has been acting as a military advisor since joining Charlotte, and has also given Charlotte advice, he is still a powerful orc saint level warrior. Once he bursts out with all his strength, his bloodthirsty fighting spirit will turn into flames that soar into the sky, and he also has an unstoppable and resolute momentum. He rushed into the body of the flame evil god, relying on the powerful fighting spirit of the 22nd level, so he can be safe for a while. Following the direction found by the blood spirit, he soon saw Gareth with his eyes closed. Chapter 421 Summoning the Evil God has a price. Summoning the Evil God has a price. Well, for example, Charlotte Mecklen is that price. Teacher Charlotte Wang Heisheng has a deep understanding of this. Although Gareth is a strong saint, he still cannot be exempted from this price. At this time, he can only mobilize the strength of his whole body to resist the erosion of the evil god's power. Once his soul is eroded by the fire evil god Enlulu, he may still exist in the physical sense, but in the sense of the soul, he will definitely be reduced to ashes. Black Dragon pushed with both hands, turning the magic rapier that Charlotte had given him into a red light, and fiercely pierced Gareth's chest. If Gareth was in normal state, the old lizard men would be at most on par with him. Even if the winner was decided, it would not be a day or a half, at least a few days and nights of fierce fighting. The battle of the saint level, thanks to the fact that the saint level can fly, unless it is a crushing game, it will last for a long time. But at this moment, Gareth was resisting the will of the evil god with all his heart. He firmly believed that with the protection of the evil god's incarnation, no one could hurt him. By the time he reacted, it was too late. Gareth was pierced through the chest by a high-level magic dagger, and the connection between him and the evil god was disrupted. He was horrified and suddenly opened his mouth and spurted out a stream of fire, forcing the black dragon away, and wanted to cut off the connection with the fire evil god. He was confused. If he continued to summon the evil god, he might not be able to hold on for much longer. The black dragon stepped aside and dodged the stream of fire. With a casual move, the blood rhinoceros was thrown into Gareth's mouth. Gareth didn't expect that such a person would happen on the battlefield. He was spurting out a stream of fire again. At the moment of recovering his breath, he actually swallowed a blood rhinoceros. The blood rhinoceros entered Gareth's stomach and immediately grew countless tentacles, which pierced into the stomach of this holy level. Although Gareth didn't know what happened in the stomach, but he could sense that a small part of the fighting spirit disappeared when it was circulating in his abdomen. Eating random food on the battlefield was definitely not a good thing. His soul was gushing out, and a string finally broke. The will of the flame evil god Enlulu, which had been torturing Gareth's soul repeatedly, suddenly found a gap and gushed out. Gareth let out a long and shrill howl, and his heart was filled with fear. Being devoured by the evil god, occupying the body, and stealing the memory. This is the result that everyone who comes into contact with the evil god does not want to face the most. No one wants to be the food of the evil god. The black dragon succeeded in one blow and immediately withdrew from the incarnation of the flame evil god Honolulu. Fortunately, this evil god was eroding Gareth with all his strength, and Antonio and Cretus worked together to help him maintain a channel all the time, so that the black dragon could rush out again. Although the old lizard man was covered in fireworks and his clothes were burned, and he was also corroded by the breath of the fire evil god, he had to force his fighting spirit to repel the evil power that invaded his body, but he still had a smile on his face. He said to Antonio and Cretus, "Gareth should be dead. Next, we just need to wait for Lady Black Moon to arrive." Antonio and Cretus were very surprised, and they asked together, "What did you do to Gareth?" Black Dragon smiled and said, "I injected the blood spirit into his body." Cretus had been loyal to Charlotte for a short time and had never heard of the blood spirit, but Anthony had seen it. Although Charlotte never showed off, he had used the blood spirit in battle, and the origin of the blood spirit was no secret. Antonio said, "Don't take such risks next time. All the rituals and secrets of summoning evil gods have the function of temporarily blocking the perception of the 9 righteous gods, but if the person who summoned the evil god can no longer control the situation, then the rituals and secrets that conceal the power of the evil god will become ineffective. If it was a small-scale evil god coming, the righteous gods would notify the nearby priests and let the believers on earth deal with it. But this time, Mossard and Gareth made such a big show. The evil power sent by the flame evil god Honolulu was already extremely huge, and the condensed incarnation was like a mountain. The arrival of the 9 righteous gods was only a matter of time. Now it is the Black Moon era, and the only one who will come is Lady Black Moon. Lady Black Moon will definitely not be late. The huge body of the flame evil god suddenly stagnated, and then let out a joyful roar. It was obvious that Gareth had been dealt with. It was no longer willing to fight for mortals. It suddenly raised its huge paw and chopped the ground hard. The powerful impact force hit the ground, and a terrible crack extended, causing the Holy Light God Kingdom to tilt slightly, and the king who entangled with him also swayed. This flame evil god retreated from the Holy Light God Kingdom, twisted his body, and ran wildly into the distance. Charlotte struggled to jump out of the Holy Light Kingdom, and tried to raise his hand. The entire legendary warship turned into a ray of light and turned into a golden ring. He shouted to the sky, "Take me to catch up." Vigo, who was collected by him along with the Holy Light Kingdom, couldn't help but shout, "I can take you to fly." However, his voice could not reach the legendary warship at all. At this time, the soldiers of the Brett Knights and the Knights of Favonius in the Holy Light Kingdom did not feel any changes. They were still on a huge ship, which was still shrouded in a layer of light. Originally, they could not enter and exit at will, and now they still could not enter and exit at will, but the perspective changed. Every time Charlotte waved her arms, they could not feel the shaking of the Holy Light Kingdom, but felt a rotation of the world. Countless huge things came over, and the whole world seemed to be in turmoil. This feeling was very wonderful. Afterwards, every soldier who boarded the Holy Light Kingdom described the same scene in various languages. This scene was even later written by Annie Mecklin in Charlotte's biography too. As for the author of this book, his name did not remain in the history of literature. The golden Gothralf landed gracefully and carried Charlotte on his back. The 7 saints chased the fire giant all the way, ready to force him to turn around at any time. They could not let him enter the place where humans gathered, and could not let him enter the city, town, or countless humans would be killed and injured. This incarnation of the fire evil god did not want to fight these enemies. He certainly was not afraid of these humans, but for him, this kind of battle was meaningless. What he needed was to strengthen himself, and this kind of battle would only weaken his power. Charlotte didn't understand what the Black Dragon wanted to do. He could still vaguely sense the existence of the blood spirit, but he couldn't summon it back. The flame evil god ran for hundreds of kilometers, leaving flames everywhere he passed, burning a path of fire. He wanted to get rid of the pursuers behind him, but Charlotte suddenly shouted, "Force him into the Black Phoenix's territory." Chapter 422, Black Moon Lady's Small Reward. Honolulu suddenly stopped. He was forced to the border of the Black Phoenix dynasty by Antonio, Cretus, and several other saints of Fars, but he stopped. Charlotte was just trying to force this scourge into the enemy's territory, so that the Black Phoenix people would also be in a mess. It would be best if a few saints came out to kill the evil god with him. Witnessing this scene, he thought, does the Black Phoenix have any powerful means? It makes the evil god hesitate. Then he saw a scene that he would never see in his life. No matter how blazing the flames of Honolulu's incarnation were, the darkness ahead was so thick that it could not be dissolved. A petite lady with a delicate figure walked out of the darkness. No one can describe his appearance. All the words in the world are eclipsed in front of him. No one can draw his spirit. All the painting techniques of time will appear so rough in front of him. After all, Charlotte had seen the evil gods and faced the righteous gods, so she had quite some relevant experience. She jumped down to the ground, knelt on one knee, and made a most respectful and pious gesture. At the same time, she emptied her body and mind, and filled her brain with praise for Lady Black Moon. Seeing this, the golden goat Rolf also knelt on one knee. He was not as smart as Charlotte, and thought to himself, is this Lady Black Moon? The god who controls this era, Anthony, Kratos, Black Dragon, Chiudelo, Asperus, and Regulus also landed on the ground and knelt on one knee. In front of the righteous gods, no one could leave the ground with both feet, and no one could stand. The flame evil god Honolulu suddenly roared, and the flames on his body gathered and turned into a flaming tornado that soared into the sky. It was so powerful and fierce that it really lived up to the reputation of the 36 great evil gods of the New World. The Lady of the Black Moon opposite him did nothing, not even fighting. She just stretched out her hand and lightly touched Antonio, and Antonio could not help but fly into the sky. He heard her whisper in his ear, "My loyal knight. Kill this evil god for me." Antonio immediately raised the dragon beating stick without any hesitation, but the dragon beating stick in his hand suddenly vibrated and changed its form, turning into a black knight's lance. Although Antonio changed his martial arts for the dragon beating stick, his most proficient skill was still the knight's lance. At this time, the dragon beating stick changed the form of the Lady of the Black Moon. He only felt that his whole body was full of fighting spirit, and even his strength was constantly increasing. He shouted and rushed out to fight with the incarnation of the fire evil god Honolulu. Every time Antonio fired a shot, he would have a feeling that he could know how much damage this shot could cause to Honolulu. Every time Honolulu counterattacked, he could know how much power the evil god used and where there were flaws. Originally, he and Kratos could only slightly stop the evil god together, but with the power of Lady Black Moon, Antonio was covered in mist, and his momentum was not inferior at all, fighting back and forth with the flame evil god. Lady Black Moon sat on the top of a mountain, holding her cheeks with her hands, and seemed to be watching the battle with interest. Kratos and others did not dare to blaspheme the righteous god, nor did they dare to look at Lady Black Moon too much. But Charlotte could not help staring at the righteous god. He desperately piled up praises for the righteous god in his brain, while enjoying the crazy improvement of his spirituality. Charlotte's previous face-to-face with the evil god raised his spirituality to the level comparable to that of a high-level extraordinary, and his cultivation progressed by leaps and bounds. Later, he not only faced the evil god, but also the righteous god. Each time, his spirituality would be greatly improved, and his cultivation progressed rapidly, even allowing him to be promoted to the 16th level extraordinary in just over a year. But this benefit is not infinite. The spiritual power that is raised will still slowly fall down. Although it will not fall down to a certain level, it will give people a small permanent spiritual increase. The spiritual power that was raised by the last contact with the color of destiny has already fallen back. Now that Lady Black Moon is in front of her, how could Charlotte not take more spirit? Charlotte even seemed to hear the sound of the system, and the bloody glory of her body burned. She quietly jumped a level and was promoted from the 16th level to the 17th level. But then, he burst into tears. Even if he tried hard to open his eyes, he couldn't see Lady Black Moon clearly. Charlotte lowered his head in a hurry. He didn't dare to think about the plot of the online novel. Even if it was an online novel with a heroine, it was a bit blasphemous. He could not stop imagining in his mind, Huangdi fought against Xiao, and the 9 Sky Black Moon mysterious lady instructed Huangdi to make a compass car and break the fog of Xiao. The heavenly mandate Blackbird descended and gave birth to Tang, and the Black Moon goddess instructed Tang to learn culture and establish the Sherlock magic dynasty. When the last emperor of the Sherlock dynasty visited the Black Lady Temple, he wrote an obscene poem, and was instructed by the Black Moon Lady to destroy the founding emperor of Fars, King Axel, and the Sherlock magic dynasty was destroyed. Well, if you haven't really faced the gods, you can't imagine how exhausting this matter is. Charlotte was afraid that if she was not careful, she would be destroyed by the way of the gods directly. Charlotte was like walking on a tightrope, afraid that if any plot made the Black Moon Lady uncomfortable, she would be in big trouble. If the online writer wrote a bad plot, most readers would just choose not to read it, and a few would scold the author, but there were actually not many readers who really mailed razor blades. Generally, only the top popular authors could enjoy such an honor. If it involves something that shouldn't be written, it means the whole network will ban it. Even if it's a pornographic article? It's just a sewing machine for more than 10 years. But at this moment, if Charlotte doesn't think of a good plot, there may be no one in heaven and earth who can protect him, not even the snake of fate. This is much more dangerous than a serious online novel. Charlotte is walking on thin ice at this moment, not knowing whether she can reach the other side. It's not so dangerous to travel to the Three Kingdoms and become an emperor. Soon, sweat came down on his forehead. This is a concrete manifestation of insufficient brain power to support his large-scale flattering high-load operation. Charlotte was trembling all over and panicking in her heart. Suddenly, she heard a chuckle in her ear. The bloody vortex in her left leg shook slightly, and 3 runes of light agility appeared. Charlotte's body tilted and she lay on the ground. Damn, this is too scary. Charlotte suddenly regretted that she had behaved recklessly. How good would it be to just pile up piety to Lady Black Moon in her brain? However, this adventure of walking on a tightrope also received rich rewards. Not only did his strength improve by leaps and bounds, he was promoted to the next level, and his agility was greatly improved. With the red and blue rattlesnakes, his agility could be increased to more than x12. No one below the saint level could catch up with his speed. Well, this was very Charlotte. Chapter 423, Black Moon Lady's Big Reward. Antonio's whole body was full of strength, and he suddenly broke through a barrier. Like his father, the old Earl of Brittany, he stepped into the 24th level, the pinnacle of the holy level. The Black Knight's spear in his hand also showed the mark of a black moon. When he urged the Holy Knight's spear, a black moon appeared behind him, which was a sign of the blessing of the Black Moon Lady. Antonio could even feel that his strength was still increasing, and had reached the limit that humans could reach. In comparison, the power of the flame evil god Honolulu was constantly decreasing. Although humans could not perceive it, almost everyone guessed that the Black Moon Lady had cut off the channel for the flame evil god to transmit power from the distant New World to the Old World. Although the goddess was motionless, she was just an incarnation of her. The real body of the Black Moon Lady might have taught the flame evil god a lesson that he would never forget. Without the support of the power of the New World, this incarnation was a fire without a source and water without a source. Antonio traveled across the sky, and the damage caused to the incarnation of the flame evil god Honolulu with each blow was becoming slower and slower. Kratos was secretly envious at this moment, thinking to himself, if it is the glorious era, the Lord of Gloriousness will definitely come, and I will definitely be able to step onto the 24th level for a short time like Antonio. As long as I can experience the power of the peak of the saint level in advance, I will definitely be able to break through to this level with my own strength in a few years. The 3 heroes and 5 strong men of the Fars Empire back then have now been divided into 3 levels. Old Brittany stands out and has entered the ranks of the strongest people in the old continent. Count Galanad and Princess Axo, although slightly inferior, are still the top strong men in the old continent. Kratos and Midas chased bravely, and although they were not as good as the old Count of Brittany, they were already on par with Count Galanad and Princess Axo. Grand Duke Robin, Duke Mussard, and Grand Duchess Misa are slightly inferior. They are old and their potential is exhausted, but they are still strong saints in the old continent and have few rivals. In fact, the saints that Charlotte can usually see, such as Black Dragon, Golden Gothroth, Chiudelo, etc., are not active on various battlefields. The ones who are really active on the battlefield are all low-level saints like Vigo. Charlotte spread his limbs, and his brain was completely down because of the high-speed operation, which was used to pat the goddess's little buttocks. However, this angle is just right for a panoramic view of the battle in the sky. The 11 bloody whirlpools in his body constantly swallowed and spit out blood energy, and the bloody glory operated spontaneously, but it was not Charlotte himself or his subconscious that drove the bloody glory to operate, but the blood spirit from the body of the flame evil god. Charlotte's brain was empty at this time, and he didn't think about anything at all, nor did he think about this abnormality. Antonio was shrouded in mist, and suddenly he saw through a flaw in the incarnation of the flame evil god. The Black Knight's lance in his hand burst into black moonlight, like a black meteor, and crashed into the incarnation of Honolulu. The knight's lance produced a tearing energy. which cut half of the body of the flame giant. Although Honolulu screamed loudly, the damage caused by this attack seemed to be unable to be repaired for a while. He stretched out one arm to the sky, and the flaming tornado that pierced the sky and the earth actually rolled back and was held in his hand, and pushed out fiercely. Antonio seemed to be locked by a certain force, and for a while he couldn't avoid it. Facing this earth-shattering attack, the loyal knight of the Black Moon goddess was shrouded in mist, and a black moon appeared behind him. He actually charged forward without fear. Lady Black Moon, who had been watching the battle quietly, raised her tender little hand and tapped it gently. Antonio only felt that there was a cylindrical energy that was bigger than a mountain behind him, pushing softly on his back, and then suddenly exerting force, making his speed soar to the speed of thunder, violently knocking away Honolulu's fire tornado, and directly penetrating the huge body of the fire evil god. Antonio had had this evil god incarnation that was as huge as a mountain many times before, but he could never cause any damage. But this time was different. The blow pushed by the goddess was like a needle puncturing a balloon, causing the power of the fire evil god Honolulu to leak out crazily. He could no longer maintain the form of a giant, but burned into a ball of flames. Antonio looked at the evil god whose mountain-like body was broken by this blow, and his heart was surging, because he had never thought that he could kill a god. Even if this time, it was not with his own strength, but with the help of the goddess's power. But killing a god is killing a god, even if it is an incarnation of an evil god, even if it is with the help of the goddess's power, but this record can still be forever engraved in the glory of the Brittany family. Antonio saw Charlotte lying on the ground and enjoying the victory, and suddenly remembered that he had fought so hard and bravely killed the incarnation of the evil god, but in the future, the record in history might be just a short sentence. It is far inferior to her sister Anne, whose story will be circulated in full, and may derive countless versions. Antonio had just completed the great feat of killing the evil god, and he felt a little stuffy in his heart. The goddess, who had always been very peaceful, suddenly raised her little hand and twisted it gently. The incarnation of the evil god that exploded into a ball of fire suddenly seemed to be washed away by some force, constantly shrinking and collapsing, and finally returned to point, and then fell to the ground. Lady Black Moon raised her left foot and stepped lightly. A road of countless glimmers of light extended from the endless sky. She stepped slowly onto this glimmer of light and returned to her kingdom of God. Everyone who witnessed this scene was shocked and couldn't help themselves. Only the most sober old lizard man landed gracefully. After a while, he smiled and brought back a man who didn't know whether to live or die, as well as a bracelet. He put Gareth down and handed the bracelet to Charlotte with both hands, saying, "Master Mecklen, I have taken back your blood rhinoceros." Charlotte took the blood rhinoceros and was about to retract the bloody vortex on her right arm when she suddenly found something a little strange. In theory, as long as a blood core is embedded in the blood rhinoceros, it can be transformed into a weapon. If a blood core of a vampire of a different race is embedded in it, it can be transformed into a different weapon. However, even the original alchemist master did not complete this idea. After it lost its original blood core, even if it had a new blood core, it still needed to be rebuilt to restore its power. But at this moment, there are 7 grooves on the blood spirit rhino that can be embedded, 2 of which have been embedded with cores. One is the holy blood core of the Duolian family, and the other is dark red like a flame, and there is a faint smoke. Chapter 424. Don't let her get in the way of my business. Black Dragon blinked his eyes, and the smile on his face was very calm and confident. Although he didn't do much, he did it right, which is very important. The evil gods in the old continent are very quiet, and rarely make any big trouble. This is not a matter of course. The 9 righteous gods fought against the evil gods thousands of years ago, and every time they fought against the evil gods, they would leave treasures transformed from the remains of the evil gods. These treasures are often rewarded to loyal believers. Well, for example, Charlotte. But the brain circuits of gods are different from those of humans. They will leave treasures and let humans distribute them themselves. Since ancient times, there have been many stories derived from treasures, and there are also many naked dark human natures. Of course, there is also Black Dragon. He threw the blood rhinoceros into Gareth's stomach. When Lady Black Moon transformed the remains of the evil god into treasures, she would naturally use the blood rhinoceros as the basis, just like she changed the dragon beating stick into a black knight's spear. What a coincidence. The blood rhinoceros is Charlotte's thing. So, the new blood rhinoceros is still Charlotte's thing. This is indisputable. Antonio would not have any objection anyway. He and Charlotte are relatives, and real relatives. There will be no dispute over interests. As for the rest of the saints, although they are all Charlotte's subordinates in name, Black Dragon does not think that Charlotte can control Kretis and others. After all, the treasures left by the gods are extraordinary. If they have other ideas, Charlotte may not be able to win steadily, and once a dispute arises over the treasure, no matter what the result is, it will cause division. At least it will sow the seeds of dissatisfaction. Charlotte may lose the loyalty of several saints. So Black Dragon had this little idea to smooth out all possible twists and turns without leaving any trace. The role of a military advisor is not to encounter troubles and solve troubles, but to make the master as trouble-free as possible. Charlotte put the blood spirit into the bloody vortex without any expression, but his heart was shocked and could not calm down for a long time. He really didn't expect that Black Dragon, the lizard-headed military advisor, could really play a role. He didn't think of such a bad idea at that time, just like he didn't think of being the first person to swear allegiance to his father-in-law last time. Charlotte released the Holy Light God Kingdom again and released the people hiding on the ship. Although he tried his best to rescue, the Brittany Knights and the Favonius Knights still suffered heavy losses, but there was really no way to avoid death. Antonio comforted Charlotte a few words. He had long discovered that this brother-in-law actually didn't like people dying for no reason. Although Charlotte still couldn't let it go, she couldn't always be entangled in this emotion. In order to chase the incarnation of the fire evil god, they chased for hundreds of kilometers. At this time, it really took some time to rush back to Mossad territory. After some discussion, Charlotte was allowed to use the Holy Light God Kingdom to reload the people and fly back to the original camp. When Charlotte and Antonio returned to the place where they fought yesterday, it was already a day later. This battle was so grand that the fire was still burning on the ground. In the direction where Enlulu fled, there was a line of ashes that stretched towards the Black Phoenix dynasty, creating a road. After the god-slaying war, everyone was extremely tired, so they did not continue to attack, especially the two knights who suffered heavy losses, so Charlotte and Antonio decided to rest and recuperate for a while. They retreated to a nearby town called Rama. After they settled down, Charlotte set out to pick up Anne and the two Miss Axel, but when he found Anne, he couldn't find the two Miss Axel. The two ladies were quite obedient along the way, and Charlotte didn't expect that such a big thing would happen in a blink of an eye. He and Antonio brought the people out, and they must bring them back safely, otherwise they would not be able to explain to Prince of Fury. Charlotte first sent Anne to Rama, and then took Black Dragon and Vigo and hurried back to the place where the two Miss Axel disappeared. At that time, the situation was urgent and in a hurry. Charlotte did not send Anne far away, but only to a nearby small town not far from Rama, called Sunny Mountain. Since he comprehended the infinite mirror world, he would create several infinite mirror worlds in every city he passed by. Although these infinite mirror worlds were connected to each other and were only a very small piece, Charlotte believed that as long as he continued, he would be able to make the infinite mirror world spread all over the old continent sooner or later. Charlotte did not bring the golden goats Rolf and Chiudalu, because although these two subordinates were powerful, they were average in brains, and the Grand Master and two Deputy Masters of the Royal Knights were obviously not suitable to be sent around, and they needed to be given the necessary respect. Only the smart Black Dragon and Vigo, whose attitude was becoming more and more prominent, were suitable to go with him to find someone. Charlotte asked Anne, and after arriving in the small town of Sunny Mountain, she had never left the carriage. Although she heard that the two Miss Axel wanted to find another more comfortable residence, she only sent someone to follow them, and did not go with them. After the two Miss Axel left, they did not come back. Charlotte left Anne with the elite guards of the maze. Although there were only a dozen of them, they were all extraordinary. The four maze guards who left with the two Miss Axel were all overbacked Red Bear warriors, and one of them was even a mid-level extraordinary. Charlotte didn't believe that anyone could kill the four overbacked Red Bear warriors. There were not many extraordinary people on this continent. Even in the four universities of Fars, among the graduates every year, the number of extraordinary people was rare, but only in the single digit. In an ordinary small town, even if there were extraordinary people, they could only be low level at most. It was impossible to kill four maze guards and kidnap the two Miss Axel, unless there were people from outside. Charlotte rushed back to Sunishan City. Instead of looking for people everywhere, she went directly to the mayor of this small town, and seized his power on the spot and issued an order. In this small town, One person was selected from each household. In just one day, a huge local army accounting for 10% of the population of Sunnyshin was organized. This was the most efficient method. Charlotte soon found out that an adventure team arrived in this small town one day earlier than he sent Annie and the others to seek refuge, and left Sunny Mountain when Annie and the others were hiding in this small town. More than one resident saw them fighting with the Red Bear warriors, and some people also testified that when the adventure team left, there were several more people in the convoy. Charlotte gave up the power he had seized without hesitation, took Black Dragon and Vigo, and chased them all the way according to the residents' testimony. Chapter 425 There is no misunderstanding. This adventure group must have an extraordinary origin. Charlotte didn't know who they were, but he believed that he had the protection of two saints and would be able to rescue them. Along the way, Charlotte became more and more convinced that he had brought the two people to find the right people. Black Dragon was a wise and thoughtful person, and Vigo was experienced. This Flame Knight alone took on the highest combat power of South Seraph and trained this. In fact, he was also a figure. However, the South Seraph Restoration Army suffered repeated setbacks, and South Seraph fell into Charlotte's hands, which frustrated his will and depressed him. The two cooperated with each other and found the correct tracking direction from very subtle traces several times. If Charlotte was alone, he would have lost them long ago. Fortunately, the two saints took him on the road, so even though the adventure group left early and repeatedly set up false formations on the way, Charlotte still caught up with the adventure group after a day and a half. From a high altitude, he saw the resting adventure group from afar and said to Vigo, "Let me down." Vigo hurriedly put Charlotte down on the ground. Charlotte strode towards the adventure group. His anger had accumulated to the full point. This time, he came with Antonio to attack Mossard. He thought it was just a battle that was a bit difficult but destined to win. After all, Antonio was powerful and he brought 7 holy subordinates. Unexpectedly, Mossard actually asked his brother Gareth to summon the Fire Evil God, so that the battle had been fought until now. The Brittany Knights and his West Wind Knights suffered heavy losses. Charlotte was very unhappy. He had never suffered such a big loss since he crossed over. Charlotte didn't know whether this adventure group had misunderstood at the beginning, but the traces of this adventure group's various disguises and luring tracking along the way showed that they had already known the identities of the two Miss Axel and must have kidnapped them intentionally. Charlotte took the opportunity to look directly at the goddess and just upgraded one level. He was already a high-level extraordinary level of level 17. When he met Claire Brittany and Abner Sumai at Georgia University, they were at this level. He had a murderous intention in his heart at this time. Bloody glory flowed around his body and gathered into a sharp evil will that swept dozens of steps. Bloody glory is a general type of evil energy. It is not like fighting spirit that condenses into a physical vision, but it can form an evil will that brings fear, trembling, submission, weakness, loss of control, and other negative emotions and physical reactions to the enemy. This adventure group was also alarmed by Charlotte. A young man suddenly jumped up and shouted, "Sure enough, there are pursuers." Charlotte reached out and took out the Knight's Spear Collapse Mountain from the magic mirror. He liked to use this Knight's Spear because it was the only blood-sucking weapon in the form of a spear in Charlotte's hand. Just as Charlotte was about to attack, he saw one of the Miss Axel running out with her arms open, shouting, "Don't do it, this is a misunderstanding." Charlotte was indeed surprised, but then she shot out and picked up the yelling Miss Axel, threw her to Vigo behind her, and shouted, "Don't let her get in my way." Sister Renee screamed and flew up. She didn't expect that Charlotte didn't listen to her explanation at all, and then she fell into a big embrace. Renee wanted to struggle down, but she heard a very charming male voice in her ear, gently saying, "Don't struggle. When Charlotte is angry, no one can stop him." Renee screamed, "My sister-in-law left voluntarily, not kidnapped as you think." Although Vigo also wanted to hear the explanation of this lady, he also understood that Charlotte was not interested. He could only say, "There's no need to explain. Charlotte won't listen to your explanation at all." Renee struggled hard, but she was not extraordinary yet. How could she break free from the arms of a saint? Helplessly, she asked, "Will Charlotte catch Marin?" Vigo hesitated for a moment and decided to tell the truth. "No." Renee just breathed a sigh of relief, and Vigo continued, "He will definitely kill that man." Renee struggled hard again. Charlotte locked her aura on the young man. He really wanted to kill someone. No matter what the reason, take the two Miss Axel away from him, so that he has no choice but to go back to Strasbourg to explain to Prince A. Fury. This person must die. No matter what his bullshit reason is. For him, there is no misunderstanding. It's just a fucking pleasure to meet. Sister Sarah also stepped out and begged in a low voice, Mr. Charlotte Mecklen, please listen to me, Charlotte said lightly. Dear Miss Axel, you probably don't know how much trouble this will bring me, but please believe one thing, no one in this world can bring me such a big trouble. Not long ago, an evil god tried it, and now it must be regretting it. Well, although it was not Charlotte who took action, he participated in the battle from beginning to end. So Charlotte said this with great confidence. Marin smiled slightly, pulled Sala behind him, and said, since this gentleman doesn't want to hear the explanation, then we won't explain. Mr. Mecklen, let's duel. If I win, please allow me to take Sala away. Charlotte smiled coldly and said, if I lose, I will let the two saints take action and make sure to kill all of your adventure team, leaving no one alive. Marin's face was angry, and he shouted, we don't have any hatred, why are you so cruel? Charlotte snorted coldly and said, that's your unilateral view. You have caused me so much trouble. Don't you think this is hatred? What the hell is this called? Marin couldn't help but say, I have a compelling reason. Charlotte didn't talk nonsense. She turned into a tornado, and her spear collapsed the mountain with great momentum, smashing it on the top of the young man's head. Without making a sound, she wanted to take people away from him. Is this called no hatred? What do you mean by having a compelling reason? This guy has a wrong outlook on life. He didn't even use any fancy moves, just powerful and fierce. Marin whistled, drew out the rapier at his waist, and swayed lightly, but then he found something horrifying. The speed he was proud of couldn't shake Charlotte off. Charlotte's shot was not fancy or exquisite, but the speed was too fast. The agility can't be superimposed in equal amounts, so Charlotte, with the grace of Lady Black Moon, condensed 3 more agility runes, making her own agility reach X5, plus the red rattlesnake amplification speed, agility X6, blue rattlesnake amplification speed, agility X7, can only increase the agility to X12. This is already a speed that can't be achieved below the saint level. Marin's face was pale, and he tried his best to slash with his sword, but it missed. The collapsed mountain fell down fiercely, smashing the young man's head into a ball of paste, and even smashed half of his body. Marin's lower body fell to the ground and was killed by Charlotte with one blow. Charlotte strode towards Sarah Axel and said, move aside, it's someone else's turn next. Sarah's face was pale, tears welled up on her pretty face, and she shouted, why did you kill him? I'm leaving voluntarily. Charlotte replied indifferently, sorry, even voluntarily is not allowed. You can go with anyone at any time, but you can never go with just anyone in front of me. I can't fucking explain to Prince Axel, why should I take the blame for you, when you do such a stupid thing? Haven't you ever thought that it will embarrass me, when you make it difficult for me? Didn't you think that I, Charlotte Mecklen, am a high-level transcendent, the leader of the Knights of Favonius, with 7 saints under me? And am not someone who should be offended? Sarah was yelled at by Charlotte and took a few steps back in shock. She knew that this was a bit inappropriate, but as a girl from the Axel family, she never thought that it was inappropriate to cause trouble to others. In this world, shouldn't everyone tolerate her, indulge her, and do anything for her? Even if Charlotte is blamed for this, it's not a big deal. But Sarah finally knew that Charlotte Mecklen should not be offended. Charlotte had no mercy on this adventure group. They could be with Marin and take people away from him, so they should naturally bear the consequences. When the adventure group saw Charlotte kill Marin, they panicked. Some people begged, some wanted to escape, and some fought hard. But everyone's fate was the same. Charlotte killed this adventure group in just a dozen seconds. This adventure group only had one high-level extraordinary Marin, and the other members had 2 extraordinary people. The rest were ordinary people, who could be regarded as experienced fighters at most, but experience was nothing in front of the extraordinary. After killing all the adventuring group, Charlotte said calmly, take the 2 ladies back. Renee couldn't help but cursed, you are the protagonist of the love story. My sister and Marin are truly in love. Why can't you help them? Aren't you the same with Anne? Marin is just an ordinary person like you. He can't marry my sister because of his status. He can only resort to this last resort. Charlotte felt relieved after killing people. He also understood why he was so furious, because Marin could take away the 2 Miss Axel, and there was a certain possibility that he would hurt Anne. He couldn't allow this to happen. Facing Renee's accusations, he said calmly, "Anne and I are indeed not worthy of each other, but I rely on my own abilities to fight for a sufficient status for myself bit by bit. Who is he? Is he worthy of being like me?" End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.